Good evening. If you're awake right now, maybe you've already given up on sleep. Maybe the night feels heavier than usual. Or maybe you just need a voice to keep you company while the world outside lies perfectly still. So, stay with me. Dim the lights. Let the hum of your phone fade away. And if you happen to hear something behind you, that's probably nothing. Tonight's first story begins on Christmas Eve. Snow on the highway, red and blue lights cutting through the dark. Two officers making their final patrol before heading home, and one girl standing by the roadside, waiting for a ride that never should have come. Story 1. The Christmas Patrol. The town of Hollow Creek was almost silent that night. Snow covered everything in a thin, glowing sheet. Parking meters, mailboxes, the cracked sign of Duke's Liquor, the Christmas lights that hung from the lampposts swayed in the wind, their colors dull through the frost. Officer Henderson sipped what was left of his coffee. It was lukewarm, tasted faintly of metal. Beside him, Patrolman Ray Carter hummed along to a carol playing quietly from the radio. Silent night, except the radio signal kept slipping, the melody warping like someone humming underwater. Can't believe we're out here instead of home, Carter muttered. Last shift of the year, Henderson said. Beats paperwork. They drove past shuttered gas stations and empty diners. Every few minutes, snowflakes hit the windshield and melted instantly, like tiny ghosts disappearing on contact. Nothing moved on the road except them, until Henderson saw her. A girl, standing by the guardrail, barefoot in the snow. He braked before his mind could even register it. The cruiser's headlights caught her fully white dress, hair damp and clinging to her face, eyes wide as if she'd just run from something. You see that? Carter asked. Yeah, call it in. The girl didn't move as they stepped out, breath fogging in the air. Up close, she looked no older than 19. Her hands were clasped together like she was praying. Miss, are you all right? Henderson's voice softened. It's freezing, you shouldn't be out here. She blinked slowly. Then, barely audible over the wind, she said, My name is Lily. I missed my ride. Her voice trembled. Not from cold, something else, maybe. Carter fetched a blanket from the back seat, draping it over her shoulders. They asked for ID. She reached into her coat pocket, handed over a driver's license. Photo, name, everything checked out. All right, Lily. We'll give you a lift back into town. You can call your folks from the station. She nodded, quietly. When they opened the cruiser door, she hesitated a moment like she was deciding whether to trust them, then slid into the back seat. SFX. Door closes, engine starts. Radio hum resumes, faintly dissonant. As they drove, Carter tried to make small talk. Rough night to be walking, huh? You live around here? No answer. Just the sound of the tires over slush. Henderson adjusted the rearview mirror. Lily was sitting perfectly still, eyes fixed on the window. Her reflection in the glass didn't quite match her posture. A slight delay, as though she were half a second behind. He blinked, refocused. It was gone. Maybe just the streetlights. Maybe fatigue. Carter turned the radio louder to drown the silence. Another carol, but this time, the words were wrong. The singer's voice dragged, slowed, repeating, Sleep in heavenly, sleep in heavenly, sleep. Henderson reached to switch it off. But before he could, Lily spoke. You shouldn't take this road. Her voice was flat, almost detached. Why's that? Carter asked, forcing a chuckle. She looked at him then, eyes pale gray, almost colorless. Because that's where I died. Silence. Only the wipers moved. Carter gave a nervous laugh. All right, enough jokes. But Henderson didn't laugh. He was staring at the rearview mirror again. The back seat was empty. The blanket lay crumpled, wet with melting snow. The snow had stopped by the time they reached the station. The streets were glassy and silent, reflecting the orange haze of the lamps. Henderson parked the cruiser in the same spot as always, right under the flickering sign that said Hollow Creek Police Department. Inside, the lobby was empty, except for the hum of the vending machine. and the faint smell of burnt coffee. It was close to midnight, and most of the staff had already gone home for the holiday. Only dispatcher Mary Collins sat at the front desk, her chair turned toward a tiny portable TV playing muted reruns of a Christmas special. She looked up as the two men entered, shaking snow off their coats. "Back early," she said, smiling. "Quiet night?" "Quiet enough," Henderson answered. He glanced toward the monitor on her desk. "Any calls while we were out?" "Just a couple of noise complaints. Oh, and a strange one about an accident out on County Road 9. Some driver reported seeing a body." Henderson frowned. "A body? Yeah, but by the time the other unit got there, nothing. Probably a deer." Carter leaned on the counter. "You ever hear of a girl named Lily Winters?" Mary thought for a second. "Can't say I have." "Why?" Carter handed over the ID the girl had given them. "Picked her up near the bridge. She said she missed her ride." Mary took the card and squinted at it. "This looks familiar." She turned to her computer, typing something. "Hold on." The air seemed to thicken as she scrolled. Then she stopped. Her face changed. "You said her name's Lily Winters?" "Yeah." Mary looked up at them, confused. "That can't be right. She died 2 years ago. Hit and run. Out by the old bridge." "Hey." Neither man spoke. The only sound was the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights. Henderson took the ID back. The picture on it looked normal until it didn't. The edges of the photograph had begun to fade, as though the ink were dissolving under his fingers. He blinked, and it was gone. A blank card stared back at him. Carter swore under his breath. That's impossible. Mary looked at them worried. "You two okay?" Henderson didn't answer. He walked toward the hallway, the ID still in his hand, but his fingers were trembling. He felt a strange ringing in his ears, like distant static. They went to the locker room to remove their coats. The air smelled of wet leather and cold metal. Henderson caught his reflection in the mirror. His face looked pale, eyes sunken, lips cracked from the cold. But behind him, for a heartbeat, he thought he saw movement, a shape. The faint outline of a girl in a white dress. He turned. No one. Only the open door and the dim corridor beyond. Carter muttered, "Man, I need a drink. You want something?" "Yeah. Whiskey if there's any left." Carter laughed uneasily and left. His footsteps echoed down the hall, fading into the quiet. Henderson sat on the bench. He stared at the blank ID again, then at the locker door where someone had pinned a small Christmas card. It showed a snow-covered bridge and the words "Peace on Earth." The ringing in his ears grew louder. It sounded like a voice now, a whisper. He couldn't make out the words. He stood, walked toward the hall. The lights above flickered as he passed. The station felt wrong, too still, as if time itself had slowed a fraction. When Carter returned a few minutes later with a bottle in one hand and 2 paper cups in the other, the lobby was deserted. Mary was gone. The hallway lights were dimmed. He called out, "Henderson?" No answer. He went down the corridor, past the evidence room, past the row of silent filing cabinets. At the end of the hall was the locker room door half open. Inside, Henderson sat on the bench, staring at the floor. "You good?" Carter asked. Henderson didn't look up. Carter stepped closer. "Man, you look..." Then he stopped. Henderson's face was pale, drained of all color, eyes fixed on nothing. In his hand was the blank ID, folded neatly in half. Carter grabbed his shoulder. The body slumped sideways, cold and rigid. The cup fell from Carter's hand and rolled across the tiles, spilling dark whiskey that gleamed like oil under the fluorescent light. He stumbled back, choking on air. He ran for the door, shouting for help. But his voice came out hollow, distorted. And then he heard it. The same whisper Henderson had heard before. Soft, female, close to his ear. "You shouldn't have taken that road." He turned. The hallway was empty. He ran to the dispatch room. The TV was still playing the same muted show, snowflakes flickering across the screen. The phone on the desk began to ring. He hesitated, then picked it up. "Carter," he said, voice shaking. The line crackled. A voice on the other end spoke, calm, detached. "Officer Ray Carter? Yeah. Who is this?" "This is County Dispatch. We're calling to report an accident out by the bridge. 2 fatalities. Officers involved." He froze. "Repeat that?" The voice continued, steady as a machine. "Names: Officer Daniel Henderson and Patrolman Ray Carter. Collision with an unknown female suspect. Declared deceased at the scene." The phone slipped from his hand. He backed away, breath quick and shallow, eyes wide as he stared at the receiver swinging from its cord. The door behind him creaked. He turned. The hallway lights flickered again. At the far end stood the girl in the white dress, wet hair clinging to her face, eyes hollow and gray. For a moment, Carter couldn't move. His voice broke. "What do you want?" She didn't answer. She simply lifted a hand, pointing toward the exit. He ran, out through the lobby, past the empty desks, through the snow-covered parking lot. His boots slipped on the ice, his breath ragged. The cruiser was still there, headlights dimmed. He pulled the door open, but the seats were soaked, as if someone had poured water inside. The smell of decay hit him hard, sweet and rotten. On the passenger side window, faint letters appeared, written from the inside. "Sleep in heavenly peace." The wind rose, scattering the snow into small spirals. When the morning shift arrived, they found the station quiet. The liquor bottle stood half empty on the desk, 2 cups, 2 coats hanging by the door. In the locker room, the benches were wet with melted snow. The only sound was the slow, steady drip of water from somewhere unseen. And on the front counter lay an ID card. The name was Lily Winters. The picture was clear again, but this time, she was smiling. Morning came slowly to Hollow Creek. The town, wrapped in frost, seemed to be holding its breath. Sunlight touched the roofs of the police station and made them glitter faintly, as if pretending that nothing had happened. Sergeant Alan Price arrived first. He parked his truck, stepped out, and immediately noticed the silence. The station always had some kind of noise, a radio playing, someone laughing, a phone ringing. Today, it was like stepping into a photograph. Inside, the lights were still on. 2 paper cups sat on the counter, one tipped over, a dark ring staining the wood. There were footprints melting into puddles on the tiles, but no one to make them. "Carter?" he called. "Henderson?" No answer. He checked the locker room, then the dispatch office, then the hall. Everything was in place, but it all felt off, as though someone had moved through the building and carefully put everything back where it belonged. Too neat. Too still. Mary Collins's desk sat empty. The little TV that she always left on for background noise had burned out overnight. The screen was black, but the reflection on it wasn't his own. It looked like 2 figures standing behind him. He spun around. Nothing. Just the long hallway stretching back into shadow. Price muttered under his breath. He'd been with the department for 22 years. He'd seen accidents, fires, suicides, but nothing ever made the air feel this heavy. He picked up the phone and called dispatch. When they answered, his throat was dry. "This is Sergeant Price at Hollow Creek. I need a unit sent over. 2 of my officers, Carter and Henderson, haven't checked in." The line crackled, and a voice replied, "Copy that, Sergeant. Funny thing, we already have a report about them." "And from who?" "State Patrol. There was a crash last night on County Road 9. A patrol car. 2 bodies. Names matched yours." Price went still. "That's impossible. They're..." He stopped. He didn't know what they were anymore. "Sergeant," the dispatcher said carefully. The report was filed at 11:42 p.m. Price felt the back of his neck prickle. He looked up at the station clock. It was stuck at 11:42. By the time the other officers arrived, 2 from the neighboring precinct and 1 state investigator, the air outside had turned gray again. Clouds pressed low over the town. Detective Mary Ann Holt, short-haired and sharp-eyed, led the inspection. She walked through each room slowly, jotting notes into a little leather book. She touched the paper cups, sniffed the whiskey, opened the lockers. "No sign of struggle," she murmured. "No broken glass. No signs of forced entry." "Yen." Price followed behind her. They came back from patrol sometime after 11. Talked to Collins, apparently. Then, he hesitated. Then they were gone. Holt raised an eyebrow. And Collins? She's missing too. Holt turned to him. You're sure she didn't go home? Price shook his head. Her car's still outside. She took a deep breath, looking around. The place smelled faintly of melted snow and something metallic, like cold iron. Then, one of the younger officers called from the hallway. Detective, you need to see this. They followed him to the evidence room. The door was ajar, the light flickering inside. On the floor, near the metal shelves, were 2 sets of wet footprints, bare feet, small, almost delicate. The prints led halfway across the room and then stopped, as if the person had vanished into the air. Holt crouched down. Female, judging by size. Price nodded slowly. She said her name was Lily. Lily Winters. The detective looked up. Winters? The girl who died in the hit and run 2 years ago? He nodded again. Holt's pen paused mid-note. You can't be serious. Wish I wasn't. Outside, the wind began to rise, scraping across the station windows. Price stepped out to get a breath of air, but something made him stop on the porch. There were tire tracks frozen in the snow cruiser tires, no doubt, but they didn't lead toward the main road. They ended halfway through the lot, curving slightly before fading, like the car had driven into thin air. He crouched, tracing the edge of the print with his glove. The snow inside the tracks wasn't just frozen, it was scorched black, as if heat had touched it from beneath. He felt something cold bloom in his chest. He stood quickly and looked back at the building. Through the front window, he saw movement. 2 shapes, sitting side by side on the bench inside the lobby. He blinked. They were gone. Back inside, Holt was replaying something on the desk monitor, security footage from the previous night. The camera angle showed the lobby. 11:26 p.m. Henderson and Carter walking in. Mary handing them coffee, chatting. Nothing unusual. At 11:41, Carter left toward the supply room. Henderson remained, flipping through a report. The image glitched for a moment, the frame distorting, colors bleeding. When it cleared, Henderson was still there, but the timestamp froze. 11:42. Holt leaned closer. It stuck. Price swallowed. That's when dispatch got the crash report. She looked back at him. Are you saying they died at the same minute they walked in here? Before he could answer, the monitor flickered again. The static hissed, forming vague shapes, like faces pressing against the glass. Then, through the interference, a voice came distorted, low, drawn out. You shouldn't have taken that road. The screen went black. Later that afternoon, they received the official crash report from the State Department. The photos were bleak, mangled cruiser, snow piled around it, 2 bodies covered in sheets. But something in the pictures made Holt stop cold. In one photo, half buried in the snow beside the wreck, was a 3rd set of footprints, bare feet, leading toward the bridge. She stared at them for a long time, then turned the photo over. On the back, someone had scribbled a line in pencil, "Sleep in heavenly peace." Her hands trembled. By evening, the rest of the staff left. Only Price and Holt stayed behind, sorting through the files in silence. At some point, Price realized the air had gone colder again. His breath came out in mist. He heard a sound soft, like fabric brushing the floor. Did you hear that? He asked. Holt didn't answer. He turned. Her chair was empty. The papers she'd been holding fluttered down one by one. The hallway stretched open behind her desk, the lights dimming in sequence, as if someone were walking slowly away. He followed, calling her name once, twice. At the end of the corridor, the locker room door stood open. He stepped inside. The smell of wet snow returned, stronger now. 2 coats still hung by the door, 2 cups on the bench, and on the mirror above the sink, words written in condensation. They came back first. The letters faded as he stared at them, melting into droplets. He backed out slowly, every muscle in his body tight. He grabbed his radio, pressed the button. "This is Sergeant Price at Hollow Creek Station," he said, voice shaking. "We need—" Static filled the line. Then, faintly, beneath the static, he heard breathing. Not his own. Then a whisper. "You're next." That night, drivers passing through town saw the station lights flicker on and off until dawn. When the morning came, the building was empty again. Only the snow outside remembered what had happened. 2 sets of footprints led from the porch toward the bridge, then disappeared halfway across the frozen river, as if the ice had swallowed them whole. For several days after the report, Hollow Creek existed in that strange hush that follows tragedy, a silence that feels too deliberate, like the whole town had agreed not to breathe too loudly in case the dead might hear. The newspapers printed short columns about the accident, photos of the wreck, the bridge covered in frost. The townsfolk read them without reading, then folded the pages and tucked them away. Everyone knew the bridge. Everyone had driven across it, maybe even glanced once at the spot where the guardrail bent slightly outward, never asking themselves why. On the 5th night after the crash, a truck driver named Paul Naylor was heading back from the interstate, half asleep at the wheel, the radio mumbling static between stations. The snow had started again, thin and restless. He slowed when he saw flashing lights ahead, red and blue, cutting through the mist. A police cruiser sat by the roadside, its engine idling, door slightly open. 2 silhouettes moved near the bridge. Paul felt relief at first. Maybe there had been another accident, and they were handling it. He rolled down his window, about to ask if they needed help, but then one of the officers turned toward him, and the words froze in his throat. The man's face was gray, like something pressed out of wax, eyes hollow but alert, the skin around his mouth still cracked with frost. He lifted a hand in a slow, almost mechanical gesture. The other officer bent beside him, placing something on the ground, a small bouquet of withered flowers, tied with police tape. Paul reversed so fast the truck fishtailed. When he checked the rearview mirror, the lights were gone. The road behind him was empty. But when he got home, hours later, there were 2 wet footprints on his front porch, bare, side by side. Rumors spread quietly. Some said they'd seen the same cruiser parked by the bridge each night, always with the lights flickering, engine silent, as if waiting. Others claimed to hear voices through their scanners, brief transmissions from a patrol unit that didn't exist anymore, call signs that had been retired. Static punctuated by a single phrase. "We're still en route." The chief dismissed it all, ordered the channel logs checked, found nothing. But a few of the younger officers began refusing the night shift. By the 2nd week, the snow had piled high along Main Street, turning the lamplight into something thick and yellow. The town Christmas decorations still hung from poles, frozen mid-sway. One evening, an old woman named Esther Lockwood phoned the station. She said someone had knocked on her door just after midnight. When she opened it, 2 policemen were standing there, faces shadowed under their caps. They asked if she was alone. She told them yes. They told her to lock her doors and stay inside, that something bad was coming down from the hills. Then they turned and walked into the snow. She watched them from her window as they moved toward the bridge. She said she recognized one of their voices. It was Officer Henderson. No one believed her, of course, but when the deputy checked her front steps the next morning, there were prints again. Bare feet in the snow. Across town, people began noticing odd things. Car alarms going off near the bridge, radios tuning themselves to dead channels, faint voices whispering along the power lines during storms. A young couple driving home late one night saw headlights approaching from behind. The vehicle followed them for several miles, too close, the beams flooding their mirrors. When they finally turned off onto their street, the lights vanished. The husband got out, heart pounding, expecting to see tire tracks behind them. There were none. The bridge itself became something people avoided. The county eventually set up barriers, detouring all traffic. But every morning the barriers were moved aside, snow pushed back as though by a passing car. The only thing left behind were flowers frozen into the ice, and the faint smell of exhaust. Sergeant Price's name was spoken in hushed tones now. Some said he disappeared. others that he'd been transferred quietly to another district. But one night, the janitor at the station, an old man who worked odd hours, swore he saw Price in the hallway. Said he looked tired but calm, like he'd been working late. When the janitor greeted him, Price didn't respond, only kept walking toward the locker room. The janitor followed, curious, but when he opened the door, there was nothing inside except the same 2 coats, still hanging, still damp around the sleeves. Winter dragged on, relentless. The days shrank until the sun felt like an afterthought, something the town had imagined once and then forgotten. And in that long gray silence, the people of Hollow Creek began to fold the story into their lives the way small towns do. They turned it into a warning, a way to remind each other not to drive too late, not to take the bridge when the snow was thick, not to stop for anyone by the roadside no matter how lost they looked. Some nights, though, when the wind comes down from the hills and rattles the old signs along the highway, truckers still say they see the lights. A cruiser idling on the shoulder, its paint clean despite the snow, its windows fogged from the inside. 2 figures sitting quietly in the front seat, waiting for a call that never ends. They say if you drive by slowly enough, you can hear the radio. It's always the same song, drifting through the static, silent night, but the words don't come out right. The melody twists halfway through, and the singer's voice turns hollow. The refrain repeats over and over, soft, deliberate, like the sound of breath fogging glass. Sleep in heavenly peace. Sleep in heavenly peace. Those who've heard it say the air goes still for a moment afterward, as though the night itself pauses to listen. And if you glance into your rearview mirror before the sound fades, you might notice 2 shapes, walking beside the road, slow and steady, snow clinging to their boots, though neither leaves a footprint behind. That's when you turn off the radio, roll up the windows, and keep driving without looking again. Because in Hollow Creek, they say the patrol never really stopped. And every Christmas, when the first storm hits, someone new swears they've seen them. 2 officers, a girl in white between them, heading toward the bridge. By late December, the bridge had been sealed completely. Concrete barriers blocked both ends, warning signs nailed into the wood in crooked rows. No one was supposed to cross anymore, not even on foot. Yet sometimes, early in the morning when the fog was low, faint tire marks appeared on the frozen road, too fresh, too symmetrical to be old. People said the ghosts of Hollow Creek still patrolled, as if duty had outlived the men who carried it. When the new recruit, Evan Miller, joined the department after New Year's, no one told him much about the bridge. He'd heard fragments of the story from the other officers, half jokes, half prayers, but he figured it was a way to haze the rookie. He was 24, clean-shaven, determined to make an impression. The town felt small, forgettable. He didn't believe in haunted roads. One night, a storm rolled in from the mountains. Wind shook the windows of the station, and the power lines sang in the cold. Evan was alone on duty. The others had gone home early to avoid the snow. The dispatcher's radio was silent, except for a faint hiss that came and went like breathing. He poured coffee into a paper cup, stared at the dark parking lot, and told himself he didn't mind the quiet. Then, from the static, a voice rose. At first he thought it was interference, a fragment from another channel. But the words were clear, calm, official. Unit 4, 2, requesting status check, northbound on County Road 9. Evan froze. That call sign had been retired. He checked the screen. No signal. Just the low hum of the transmitter. He pressed the button. "This is Miller, at Hollow Creek Station. Identify yourself." Silence. Then, again, the voice closer, as if it were inside the room. "Proceeding to the bridge." Passenger recovered. The temperature in the room dropped sharply. The coffee in his cup rippled, trembling against the rim. "Miller here," he said, trying to steady his voice. "Say again. Who is this?" The line cracked. Then a third voice entered, faint and feminine. "You shouldn't take that road." He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. The radio went dead. For a long moment he just stood there, the hum of the lights filling his head. He told himself it was a prank, maybe a recording. But then came the low growl of an engine outside. Through the window, he saw headlights moving across the lot, blue and red glows flickering under the snow. A cruiser, the same model the department had junked months ago. It pulled up to the door and stopped. The headlights dimmed but never turned off. He hesitated, then stepped outside. The snow reached his boots. The wind bit through his uniform. The car was idling, exhaust curling in pale ribbons. Two figures sat in the front seats, unmoving. The windshield was fogged, but he could see just enough the outline of a man in the driver's seat, another beside him, both wearing uniforms. He approached slowly, the crunch of snow echoing louder than it should. He knocked on the glass. No response. He leaned closer, squinting through the frost. The driver's head turned, not fast, not sudden, just a smooth, unnatural movement until the eyes met his. Gray, hollow, and endless. Evan stumbled back. Jesus Christ. The engine revved once, a deep guttural sound, and then the cruiser backed away. It turned toward the road, tires gliding effortlessly over the ice, and headed in the direction of the sealed bridge. Evan ran to the radio, shouting for backup. Static answered him. He grabbed his flashlight, his keys, and his fear, and drove after it. The town was a blur of white and shadow. The headlights in front of him were steady, always just far enough ahead to keep him chasing. When he reached the bridge, the barricades were gone. They lay in the ditch, as though gently lifted aside. The cruiser had stopped at the midpoint. The red lights pulsed faintly in the mist, illuminating the broken guardrail where the first crash had happened. Evan stepped out, the wind howling around him. The bridge groaned beneath the weight of ice. He called out, "This is Officer Miller. Identify yourselves." The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, slow, deliberate. He was pale under the flashing lights, his uniform dark with melted snow. His name tag was visible, even through the frost. Henderson. Evan's voice caught in his throat. The second door opened. Carter emerged, holding something small in his hand, a driver's license, old and warped. He handed it to Evan without a word. The picture was of a young woman, smiling faintly. The name read, Lily Winters. She missed a ride, Carter said softly. Behind them, the fog thickened, and for the first time, Evan saw the third figure standing near the edge of the bridge, white dress fluttering in the storm. Her face was serene, almost peaceful, eyes closed as if she were listening to a song only she could hear. "Who are you?" he whispered. The woman opened her eyes. They were the color of ash. "We're almost home." Evan took a step back, shaking his head. "You're dead, all of you." Henderson tilted his head slightly, like he was considering it. "We know." Carter smiled faintly, as though sharing a secret. "But duty doesn't end, does it?" The bridge creaked beneath them, the sound deep and wet. Evan looked down and saw the ice beginning to fracture along the rails, thin cracks spreading like veins. Water seeped up, dark and cold. He turned and ran for his car. The engine roared, tires spinning, but the fog was too thick. He could see only the faint outline of the bridge ahead, and beyond it, nothing. He slammed the gear into reverse, but the wheels didn't move. It was as if something invisible held the car in place. Outside, through the mirror, he saw them walking toward him, two men in uniform, one girl between them, bare feet, leaving no trace on the snow. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the wind. The fog poured into the car through the vents, cold and heavy, filling the space around him like water. He felt pressure in his chest, the air thinning, his vision blurred. Somewhere, faintly, a radio crackled. Unit 4, 2, requesting status check. Bridge secure. All accounted for. Then everything went silent. The next morning, road crews found the barriers knocked aside again. The bridge surface was wet, as if the snow had melted overnight. No vehicle, no footprints, no sign of disturbance, except for one thing. The single police badge lay on the guardrail, half frozen into the ice. The nameplate read Evan Miller. They sealed the bridge once more, Higher this time, thicker walls and new warning signs. But on cold nights, drivers still see red and blue lights flashing faintly through the fog, reflections moving slow across the ice. Sometimes a third light joins them, soft and white, like the shimmer of a dress. And when the wind carries just right, the town swears. It hears the faint murmur of a voice carried down from the hills, repeating the same words again and again. Sleep in heavenly peace. Story 2. The Girl on the Rooftop. They said the building was cursed long before anyone could name what kind of curse it was, before the campus expanded, before the rooftop lights went out for good. It was just a rumor among students, one of those stories you tell at midnight when everyone's too tired to laugh but too awake to sleep. Yet every year, right around exam season, someone would mention it again. The girl who jumped from the rooftop, and how, if you looked up at the right moment, you could still see her standing there, holding a bottle of barbecue sauce. On the last weekend of spring term, 5 students decided to test it. They were young, careless, maybe bored. The night was warm, the air thick with music and burnt charcoal. They dragged a portable grill to the edge of the old dormitory rooftop, laughing as they poured drinks and watched the city spread out below them. From up there, the streets looked unreal, tiny, flickering veins of light pulsing under a dark sky. Someone joked that it was like staring down at another world, one where everything still made sense. Lena was the one who brought it up. She always had that half-serious, half-playful tone that made you unsure whether she believed her own words. She said her brother, who graduated 2 years earlier, told her about the girl, a quiet student who lived in the same dorm. She went to a rooftop barbecue one night, left to buy more sauce, and never came back. They found her body the next morning on the concrete below, her hands still sticky with something dark and sweet. Some people swore she was smiling. The others laughed, pretending not to shiver. Sam lit another cigarette. Elise poured herself another drink. They didn't talk about death. They talked about exams, about the parties after graduation, about moving away and never coming back. But when the conversation thinned and the music from someone's speaker started to skip, Lena stared at the edge of the roof and said, almost dreamily, "Do you ever feel like the night is looking back at us?" No one answered. The building beneath them was an old thing, its walls cracked, its stairwells steep and narrow. The rooftop fence had long rusted away. Only a few warning signs remained, their letters bleached white by the Sunday. After a while, Elise offered to go downstairs to grab another bottle of barbecue sauce from the storage room. The others waved her off, too lazy to follow. She disappeared down the stairs, her footsteps echoing until the sound folded into the hum of the night. Minutes passed. 10, maybe 15. No one kept track. Then Sam's phone buzzed. It was Elise calling. He grinned, answered, and put her on speaker. "Did you get lost?" he teased. But it wasn't Elise's voice that came through. It was quiet, broken by soft static and the sound of breathing. Then, faintly, something like crying. He frowned. "Elise, you okay?" No answer. Just the sound of a girl sobbing, far away, like from the bottom of a stairwell. Lena leaned closer, whispering, "Elise, where are you?" The line crackled. Then a voice, not Elise's, spoke, slow and strange, as if repeating something it had heard once and was now learning how to say it again. "Don't look up." The phone went dead. Sam cursed and redialed, but the call went straight to voicemail. They exchanged looks, uncertain whether to laugh it off or run downstairs. Finally, Lena stood. "I'll go check," she said, brushing ashes from her jeans. But before she could take a step, her brother's name lit up on her own phone. She hesitated, then answered. "Hey," he said, his voice steady but strained. "Are you still with your friends? I thought you'd be home by now." "Yeah, I'm fine," she said. "We're on the roof." "Why?" He was silent for a moment. Then quietly, "Who's crying?" Lena froze. She turned to the others. No one was crying. Sam was staring at her, pale. The air had gone still. "There's no one," she said. "What are you talking about?" Her brother's voice dropped to a whisper. "Lena, listen carefully. Get off the roof. Now." The line went dead before she could respond. Behind her, Sam's eyes widened. "Hey, look." She followed his gaze. Across the street, under the pale light of the lamppost, stood the old science building, the one they'd all passed 1,000 times. It was abandoned now, windows boarded up, staircases sealed, but on the rooftop, framed against the gray sky, a figure stood motionless. It was a girl in a white dress, her hair long, her hands at her sides. Even from that distance, she seemed to be staring straight at them. No one spoke. No one moved. The night pressed in, heavy and alive, and the city below felt suddenly far away. Then the girl lifted her hand, slowly, deliberately, as if waving, and every light on the rooftop went out at once. The darkness swallowed them whole. For a heartbeat, the only thing Lena could hear was the soft hiss of the extinguished grill, the faint sizzle of something dying out. Then came the wind, slow, deliberate, curling around the edge of the roof like a living thing. Someone's phone flashlight flickered on, a thin beam cutting through the black. The light trembled with the hand that held it. "Power cut?" Sam whispered, but the rest of the campus across the street still glowed faintly. Streetlights burning, windows lit. Only their building had gone dark. The air carried the scent of cold concrete and burnt meat, and underneath it, something metallic, faint, but growing. Lena's phone buzzed again. She looked down. The screen showed no signal, but a call was coming through anyway. Private number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" The line was filled with the sound of breathing, soft, shallow, uneven. Then came a faint click, like someone opening a door in another room. "Who is this?" she asked. No reply. Only the whisper of wind against the microphone. She turned toward the stairwell door, its outline barely visible in the dark. "It's Elise, isn't it?" And then the voice came, her own voice, small and distorted, echoing from the other end of the line. "Don't come down." The call ended. For a long moment, no one spoke. They just looked at her, at the phone still glowing faintly in her hand. "That's not funny," Sam said finally, trying to sound annoyed but failing. His voice cracked halfway through. Lena didn't answer. Her throat felt dry. The words kept replaying in her mind, looping like an echo in an empty hall. "Don't come down." But Elise was downstairs. She pocketed the phone, grabbed the flashlight from Sam, and pushed open the stairwell door. The hinges screamed. A gust of cold air rushed up, smelling of damp cement and rust. The others followed, reluctantly, their footsteps hesitant and uneven. The stairwell was a narrow cylinder of peeling paint and shadows. Each step seemed to creak too loudly, as if the building itself were listening. Somewhere below, water dripped rhythmically. Halfway down, Lena stopped. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. It wasn't the dripping anymore. It was a sound softer, more human, the sound of someone humming. The melody was faint, rising and falling like breath. Sam whispered, "Elise?" The humming stopped. Then came a noise, a faint shuffle, a quick breath, and something like a laugh that wasn't quite laughter. Lena shone the flashlight downward. The beam hit the landing below, where a single wet footprint marked the concrete, glistening as though freshly made. But the air was dry. The others wanted to turn back, but she kept going, her steps slow, careful. The building seemed to twist as they descended, the stairwell turning tighter, the walls closing in. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of rain that hadn't fallen. When they reached the bottom, the hallway stretched ahead of them, long, pale, lined with storage doors. Most were locked, their numbers half peeled away. The light barely reached the end of the corridor. "Elisa," Lena called. Her voice bounced off the walls, returning softer, warped, carrying an unfamiliar echo. They moved together, the beam of light trembling. The doors on either side seemed to hum faintly as they passed, as if something behind them was alive. Halfway through, Sam's phone rang again. The sound cut through the silence, too loud, too sharp. He jumped, fumbling to answer. "Hello? Elise?" Static filled the line. Then a voice, weak and strained, came through. "Sam, it's so dark. I can't." The call broke. He shouted into the phone. "Where are you?" The answer came not from the phone, but from down the hall, a faint echo of his own voice. "Where are you?" He froze. The flashlight shook. The others turned toward the sound. At the very end of the corridor, a door stood slightly ajar. Behind it, something glowed faintly, a cold, bluish light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Lena took a step forward, then another. She reached out, pushed the door open. It wasn't a storage room. It was something older. The walls were lined with tiles, the kind used in old bathrooms. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swinging slightly though there was no wind. The floor was damp, and in the center of the room sat Elise. She was on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, her hair plastered to her face as if she had just come out of the rain. Her phone lay beside her, the screen cracked, still glowing faintly. "Elise," Lena whispered, rushing forward. "Are you hurt?" Elise looked up slowly. Her eyes were wide, unfocused. Her lips moved, but the words came out wrong, half whispers, half sobs. "I didn't go anywhere," she said. "I never left." Lena crouched beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. The skin felt cold. Too cold. "What are you talking about? We saw you go downstairs." Elise's gaze shifted toward the door. "She followed me." "Who?" "The girl. The one who bought the sauce." Lena's mouth went dry. Sam knelt beside them. "You mean the story? The one you told us earlier?" Elise didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on something behind them. Lena turned. At the doorway, half hidden in shadow, stood a figure. It was a girl barefoot, her white dress clinging to her skin, her face pale and expressionless. She looked exactly like the one from the rooftop story, but she was not on the roof anymore. Her hair hung over her shoulders, dripping though there was no water. Her hands were empty, but her fingers twitched as if remembering how to hold something. No one moved. The light above them flickered once, twice. Then the girl stepped forward. Every instinct screamed to run. Lena grabbed Elise by the arm, pulling her up, shouting at the others to move. They stumbled into the hallway, the flashlight swinging wildly. The light hit the walls, and for a moment, Lena thought she saw more faces in the shadows. Reflections that shouldn't be there, eyes glinting where no one stood. They ran till they reached the stairwell. Behind them, the sound of bare feet followed, soft, steady, unhurried. Lena pushed Elise ahead of her, the others close behind. The stairwell twisted upward, the air thick and heavy. The phone in her pocket began to ring again, vibrating against her leg. She didn't dare look, didn't dare answer. The sound followed them up, echoing through the narrow walls, until they burst back onto the rooftop. The wind hit them like ice. The city lights burned below, indifferent, alive. Lena turned to shut the door. At the bottom of the stairs, in the darkness, stood the girl. Her face was tilted upward, her expression calm, almost gentle. She lifted her hand, palm open, as though offering something. In her hand was a bottle of barbecue sauce. The door slammed shut. Lena fell against it, trembling, her breath shallow and ragged. No one spoke. No one dared move. Below them, somewhere in the dark, the phone kept ringing, and through the sound of wind, faint but certain, came a soft voice, almost curious. Who's crying now? They didn't know how long they stood there on the rooftop, pressed against the cold metal door, listening to the faint ringing that came from below. It wasn't loud, but it carried thin, persistent, like a pulse echoing through the concrete bones of the building. When it finally stopped, the silence that followed felt wrong, heavier than before, as though the air itself had been drained of something vital. Elise had stopped shaking, though her skin still looked gray, her lips pale. She kept whispering the same thing over and over, voice raw from the cold. She followed me up the stairs. She was behind me the whole time. No one knew what to say. Sam ran both hands through his hair, pacing in tight circles. "We have to get out of here," he muttered. "We call campus security, the police, someone." "There's no signal," Lena said quietly. She showed him her phone. The screen was blank, except for the clock, which had frozen at 12:04. "We can still use the stairwell," he said. "Ground floor, front exit. We're done with this." No one argued. They grabbed their bags, the flashlight, and the small cooler that still held half-burnt food, as if those useless objects could somehow make them feel anchored to the world they'd known before the lights went out. When they opened the door again, the stairwell was silent. The air that rushed up to meet them was colder now, dense with a faint smell of smoke and rain. The light from the flashlight reached only a few feet ahead before dissolving into shadow. Sam took the lead. Lena followed close behind, gripping Elise's hand so tightly that her knuckles went white. The others trailed after them, their footsteps soft, deliberate. The first flight of stairs passed without incident. But as they descended, something began to change. The air grew warmer, heavier, tinged with the smell of charcoal and meat. At first, Lena thought she was imagining it, but then Sam stopped and turned, his voice thin and strained. "Do you smell that?" It was the same smell as before the barbecue, faint but unmistakable, as though the night they'd spent laughing on the rooftop had bled into this one. Somewhere far below, there was a flicker of light, red and pulsing, as if from an unseen flame. Elise squeezed Lena's hand. "We're going the wrong way," she said softly. "No, we're not," Sam snapped. "There's only one way down." "Why?" But with each turn of the stairs, the hallway below looked the same. Same stains on the walls, same broken exit sign, same dark landing. They should have reached the ground floor by now, but the building refused to end. It simply kept looping downward, each flight identical to the one before. Lena stopped. "Wait, look at the door numbers." Each landing had a small metal plate above the fire door. They'd passed several already, each marked roof access. Sam laughed short, sharp, disbelieving. "That doesn't make sense. We've been going down for 10 minutes. He threw the flashlight beam toward the door below. The same sign, stared back at them. Roof access. The light flickered, and for a heartbeat the letters seemed to shift, stretching into another word, something unreadable, before snapping back. Lena's pulse quickened. "We're not going down," she said. "We're going up." Elise began to cry silently, covering her face with her hands. The sound of her sobbing seemed to fill the stairwell, bouncing off the walls until it sounded like a dozen voices crying at once. Sam took a step backward. "We'll go back to the top, climb out, take the fire escape," he said, as if saying it could make it true. But when they turned and retraced their steps, the staircase only kept descending, folding over itself in impossible ways. The smell of burning grew stronger. The air shimmered faintly with heat. Somewhere above or below there was the sound of laughter, faint, feminine, familiar. Lena stopped again, breathing hard. "It's her," she whispered. "The girl." Sam turned the flashlight upward, but there was nothing. Only the endless spiral of steps winding into blackness. Then, from the direction they'd come, a faint clinking sound echoed the sound of glass tapping against metal. Slowly, rhythmically, Elise looked up, her eyes wide. "She brought the sauce," she whispered. The flashlight sputtered. When it came back on, the stairwell looked wrong. The paint on the walls had peeled back, revealing damp concrete beneath. The posters that had once advertised student events were gone, replaced by scraps of old newspaper, their headlines too faded to read. The air itself felt thicker, older. Sam moved ahead again. Faster now, as if running from the truth. The others followed, too afraid to stop. The staircase twisted sharply to the left, then the right, then straightened again into a narrow landing. A door waited at the end, its handle rusted but visible. They pushed it open. For a second, none of them spoke. They were standing on the rooftop. The same grill, the same chairs, the same half-empty cups scattered across the concrete. Even the barbecue smoke lingered in the air, thin and gray. The city spread out below them, exactly as before. Sam stepped backward, shaking his head. No. No? That's impossible. Lena turned in a slow circle. Her breath fogged the air. We didn't come back up. Elise let go of her hand and walked forward, eyes glassy. We never left, she said softly. In the distance, thunder rolled. The air shifted, carrying with it a low, vibrating hum. The rooftop lights, which had been dead for hours, flickered once, dimly, as if remembering how to glow. A sound rose from below them, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like footsteps climbing the stairs. Lena felt her stomach twist. Someone's coming. The tapping grew louder, steadier. The stairwell door swung open again, slamming hard against the wall. Cold air rushed out. A figure stepped through. It was a girl, not Elise, not any of them. She was dressed in white, her hair hanging damp and heavy, her face hidden by shadow. In one hand, she held a bottle, its label faded and unreadable. The liquid inside was dark, thick, and slow-moving. She walked to the center of the roof, stopped, and lifted her head. Her face was calm, expressionless. Her eyes were wide and pale, like glass catching the light. "Who's crying?" she asked. Elise took a step forward, trembling. "I am." The girl tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. Then she smiled, a small, impossible smile that didn't touch her eyes. "You don't have to anymore," she said. Lena reached for Elise, but the moment her hand brushed her sleeve, the world shifted. The air bent, light folding inward like heat rising from asphalt. When it cleared, they were alone. Elise was gone. Only the grill remained, still warm, though no one had touched it. The bottle of sauce lay on the ground, the cap missing, the liquid inside nearly empty. Lena looked over the edge of the roof. Far below, in the streetlight's narrow circle, something red glistened on the pavement dark, spreading slowly outward. She didn't scream. She couldn't. The wind moved around her, whispering through the rusted rails. It carried with it a faint melody, one she'd heard before, somewhere between sleep and waking. A woman's voice, humming softly to herself, keeping time with the sound of dripping rain. Behind her, Sam whispered her name once, twice. When she turned, he was staring past her, at the open stairwell door. It was closing on its own, and just before it shut, she thought she saw someone on the other side, a girl holding a phone to her ear, listening. The night had stopped making sense a long time ago. Lena didn't remember when the air first began to taste like metal, or when the city lights started flickering in patterns she couldn't recognize. She only knew the time was wrong here. It stretched and folded, a slow pulse beating in reverse. Somewhere below, the campus was sleeping, but up here everything remained awake, locked in a single endless moment. Sam sat beside the cold grill, his face pale, his eyes distant. He had stopped trying to speak. Every few minutes he rubbed at his wrists, as if to remind himself he was still solid, still here. The barbecue smoke had long since faded, but its smell lingered sweet and burnt, clinging to their clothes. Lena paced the edge of the roof. She'd counted the floors earlier, desperate to find logic in something. There should have been 7 between them and the ground. 7. But every time she opened the stairwell door, it led back to this same place, the same sky, the same wind, the same half-empty cups. Sometimes, even the cigarette smoke from earlier hung frozen in the air, as though the night itself was holding its breath. She stopped near the fence, staring down at the street far below. A thin fog covered everything, pale and luminous, glowing faintly where the lamplight touched it. Somewhere down there was the spot where the first girl had fallen. She tried to remember the details her brother once told her about that story. The name of the girl, the exact floor, the time of night. But memory was slippery now, refusing to stay still. "Sam," she said quietly, "do you remember what time it is?" He looked at his watch. The second hand ticked in slow, uneven circles. "Still 12:04, he said. His voice was hollow. Lena closed her eyes. "It's like we're caught," inside that minute. A pause. Maybe we are. A sound drifted from the stairwell then. Soft and rhythmic, the steady creak of footsteps. She turned toward it, heart hammering. Not again, Sam whispered. But the door didn't open. The sound stopped, replaced by another, the faint hiss of a phone vibrating against concrete. Then a ringtone. Faint, distant, coming from somewhere nearby. It was Elise's ringtone. Lena ran to the door, pulled it open. The stairwell was empty, but the sound echoed from below, bouncing upward, a phantom signal from another floor. She descended 2 steps, 3, her hand gripping the rail so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The ringing stopped. Then, from above, she heard it again. She looked up, breath shallow. The sound had moved. It was coming from the rooftop, the place she'd just left. "Sam?" she called. No answer. She climbed back, 2 steps at a time. The moment she pushed through the doorway, she froze. The rooftop had changed. It looked the same at first. The chairs, the grill, the skyline, but the air felt thicker, slower. The lights of the city below burned dimmer, almost orange. The posters along the far wall were different too. The faded party flyers were gone, replaced by torn police tape fluttering weakly in the wind. And Sam was gone. In his place, a phone lay on the concrete, still vibrating. She picked it up. The screen was cracked, flickering between static and a call notification. "Private number," she answered. "Sam?" A pause. Then a woman's voice, calm and steady. "Is this Lena?" She swallowed. "Who is this?" "This is Officer Marin. I'm calling about your brother." Lena's breath caught. What about him?" The voice on the line hesitated. "We found his car near the old dormitory. He'd been trying to reach you. We're very sorry." Her mouth went dry. "That's not possible. I just spoke to him." Another silence. Then softer, almost kind. "No, you didn't." The call ended. The wind rose, carrying with it the faint scent of charcoal again. Lena dropped the phone, her body trembling. She turned in circles, searching for an exit, a door, anything that wasn't this endless roof. But wherever she looked, the stairwell door stayed the same distance away, just a few steps behind her, no matter which direction she walked. She began to run. Her footsteps echoed hollowly against the concrete. The skyline blurred, the stars shifting into strange constellations. The fence that had once marked the edge of the building was gone now. There was only the fog, thick and luminous, stretching into nothing. Somewhere in that white void, she heard laughter, soft, girlish, almost familiar. She slowed, turning toward the sound. A figure was sitting on the ledge, swinging her legs idly as though enjoying the breeze. "Elise?" Lena whispered. The girl turned. It was her, but not her. The face was wrong, the eyes too calm, too deep. The smile was almost kind. "I told you not to come down," the girl said. "But you didn't listen." Lena stepped back, shaking her head. "You're not Elise." The girl tilted her head. "Does it matter?" Lena tried to retreat toward the door, but the concrete stretched under her feet, widening the distance. She turned again and saw another rooftop, identical, endless, spreading out in every direction, like reflections in a broken mirror. On each one, small scenes flickered. People laughing around a grill, a girl walking to the stairwell, a phone ringing. Over and over, the same night, replaying itself with tiny variations. The girl on the ledge looked around, smiling faintly. It never really ends. Not for her. Not for us. Lena's voice cracked. "Why?" The wind carried the words away before the girl could answer. When it settled, she was gone. The rooftop around Lena darkened. The air grew heavy again. The smell of smoke sharper, bitter. She fell to her knees, gripping the ground, her mind clawing for some anchor in the noise and heat. Her phone buzzed once more in her pocket. She pulled it out without thinking. The screen glowed. Incoming call. Elise. Her hands shook. She answered. Lena? It was Elise's voice, real, terrified, desperate. Where are you? Lena said. Tell me where you are. There was a long pause. Then Elise whispered. On the roof. I'm waiting for you. The line went dead. Lena dropped the phone. It hit the ground and shattered. When she looked up, the world had changed again. The night was quieter now, the air clearer. Sam was back by the grill, exactly where he had been before. The cups were full again, the music playing faintly from the broken speaker. He looked up as if nothing had happened. You okay? You look like you saw a ghost. She couldn't speak. She just stared. From somewhere nearby, a girl's laughter echoed softly, the same laugh she'd heard before, light and fleeting. Sam turned toward the sound. Elise must be back, he said, smiling, reaching for a bottle. She said she'd grab more sauce. Lena's mouth opened, but no words came. She glanced at her phone lying cracked on the ground. The screen had gone dark, but its reflection still showed her face pale, blurred, and just behind her, another face looking over her shoulder, smiling faintly. She turned, but there was no one there. Only the wind moving across the rooftop, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke and something sweeter, darker, like sauce thickening over heat. Down below, a siren wailed somewhere far away, and the city lights pulsed once, twice, before fading again to that colorless stillness that the night in Hollow Creek, no, not Hollow Creek, somewhere else always seemed to keep. Lena closed her eyes, and when she opened them, she was back at the beginning of the night. The grill was lit. Sam was laughing. Elise was leaning against the railing, waving a bottle of sauce in her hand. The air smelled of smoke and summer. For a fleeting moment, it all felt normal again. Then her phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen. Don't look up. She raised her eyes anyway. And there above them, on the rooftop across the street, a girl in white stood perfectly still, watching. The night began again, as if nothing had happened, but Lena knew something in its rhythm had been changed forever. The laughter from her friends sounded faint, out of sync, like an old recording slightly misaligned with its playback. Every echo came a heartbeat too late. Every gust of wind carried a sound that wasn't quite wind, a breath, a sigh, a note from a song she almost recognized. She stood by the edge of the roof, arms crossed, staring at the skyline that shimmered like a dream she couldn't wake from. The city seemed smaller now, its lights dimmer, the streets twisting in unfamiliar patterns. Somewhere far below, a siren wailed, bending in pitch as though submerged in water. Behind her, Sam called her name. You okay? You've been quiet all night. I'm fine, she said automatically, the lie too soft to matter. She turned toward the group. Elise was there again, laughing, leaning over the grill to turn the food, her ponytail catching the light from the small flames. The others were chatting about classes, about graduation, about plans for the summer. Everything, exactly as it had been hours ago, or maybe days, or years. Lena looked down at her phone. No cracks, no missed calls, no strange messages. 12:04 a.m. Déjà vu, she whispered. Sam looked at her, brow furrowed. What? Nothing, she said. But the air felt heavier, like it was holding its breath for her. She checked her phone again, almost afraid of what she might see. The screen blinked once, dimmed, and then a message slid into view. Eins new voicemail. Her stomach clenched. She didn't remember missing a call. She pressed play. For a moment, there was only static, faint but sharp enough to sting the ear. Then a voice came through, soft, whispering, almost tender. Lena. It was her own voice. She dropped the phone as if it burned her. It clattered against the concrete, screen flashing once before the message continued. Louder now, spilling from the small speaker. Don't look up. Her pulse quickened. The words were the same ones she'd heard in the stairwell, the same ones from the first night, but hearing them in her own voice, low, tired, familiar, was worse. Sam frowned, stepping closer. What is that? She didn't answer. She backed away from the phone, shaking her head. I didn't record that. I didn't. The message looped. Her voice again, now distorted, warped with interference. Don't look up, don't look up, don't. The sound cut off. Then the rooftop lights flickered. Everyone froze. A low hum rolled through the building, vibrating underfoot. The city beyond dimmed, every light on every street lamp flickering once in unison, like a breath being drawn. Elise looked toward the stairwell. What's happening? Lena whispered. She's coming back. Hi. Sam's laugh was a nervous stutter. Who? The ghost? Come on, Lena, But before he could finish, the grill went out. The smoke that curled upward froze in midair, hanging there like glass. The stairwell door creaked open. A girl stepped out. The same girl. The same white dress. The same dark hair clinging to her skin. But now she looked different. More solid. More present. As though she had been gathering herself piece by piece each time the night repeated. She looked around the rooftop, eyes calm, unfocused, searching. Then she spoke. Who's crying? Her voice was soft, almost gentle. Elise's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The girl turned toward Lena. Their eyes met. You, she said. The word was not an accusation, but a recognition, a quiet acknowledgement of something that had already been decided. Lena stepped backward until she felt the cold edge of the rooftop against her calves. What do you want? She whispered. The girl tilted her head, as though trying to remember. It's not about want, she said. It's about remembering who went first. I don't understand. The girl smiled faintly. Yes, you do. The air shimmered. The city below blurred. For an instant, Lena saw herself reflected in the girl's eyes, saw a version of herself holding a bottle of barbecue sauce, laughing, the sound twisting upward into a scream that never reached the air. No, Lena said, shaking her head. No, that's not me. Huh. But the girl took another step forward. It was, once. You came back before any of us. You told the story first. Lena's breath hitched. That's not possible. Sam reached out as if to pull her back, but his hand passed through her shoulder like mist. He stumbled, eyes wide, mouth opening in horror. Lena, what's happening to you? She looked down. Her hands were fading at the edges, her skin dissolving into a faint, silvery haze. The world around her pulsed gently, each beat slower than the last. The girl in white smiled again, small and almost kind. You can stop looking now. And with that, she turned, walking toward the edge of the roof. The fog outside glowed faintly, wrapping her in soft light. Lena tried to move, to reach out, to say something, but the words tangled in her throat. The girl stepped onto the railing, paused, and looked back. It always ends the same, she said. Then she fell. No sound, no impact, just the faint rustle of wind and the lingering taste of smoke. Lena stood still. The others had vanished. The grill, the chairs, even the city lights all gone. Only the rooftop remained, floating in darkness. She turned, slowly. Behind her, the stairwell door was open again. A single phone lay on the top step, screen glowing. She picked it up. The display showed a name, Lena, missed call. Her thumb hesitated, then pressed play. Her own voice answered. It always ends the same. And from somewhere far below, another voice, Sam's, or maybe someone else's, called her name, faint and echoing through the endless stairwell. She leaned over the edge, staring into the dark, trying to find the source. The phone buzzed once more. A new message appeared, from unknown. Don't look down. She raised her head slowly. Across the street, the rooftop of the old science building shimmered in the mist. A girl in white stood there, watching. Lena lifted her phone, pressed record, and began to speak, her voice calm, steady, almost practiced. They say, every year, someone jumps from the old dormitory rooftop. They say if you look up at midnight, you'll see her watching you. But that's not true. She doesn't watch from above. She lowered the phone, eyes still fixed on the figure across the street. She's waiting for the call. The light from her phone flickered, then went out. Far below, somewhere in the fog, another ringtone began to play. The same one. Story 3. 1 a.m. There are places in a medical school that never really sleep. Even when the lights are off and the hallways fall silent, something of the day lingers there. The faint smell of disinfectant, the echo of shoes against tile, the sterile hum that never fully leaves the air. I used to think the labs were dead at night, but after my 3rd year, I realized they were only pretending. When I first entered the program, I couldn't stand the smell of the anatomy lab. It clung to everything: gloves, scrubs, even skin. That sterile sweetness of preservative fluid haunted me after hours. The scent of something once human but no longer alive. Death frightened me then, even though I had chosen a field that demanded intimacy with it. Over time, though, I learned to quiet that fear the way we all did, by naming things clinically, by categorizing. If you can reduce the human body to systems and symptoms, you can almost forget that every organ once carried a name. It was during that first winter of night rotations that I met Lynn. She was a year ahead of me, sharp, deliberate, with a laugh that cut through the fatigue of night shifts. She didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in cause and effect, in heart rhythms and blood pressure and the mechanical persistence of the human body. We sat together many nights in the pathology wing, finishing reports under the dim fluorescence that made everything look the same shade of blue. She once told me that the body was just a house, and that people were afraid of corpses, only because they reminded them of rent coming due. Ghosts are just metaphors, she said. We make them up because we hate endings. I wanted to believe her. There's a story every batch of med students passes down. It doesn't have an author, only variations. In ours, it went like this. If you stay in the research lab past midnight, keep the lights off until 1 o'clock. When the clock strikes 1, turn on your desk lamp and throw a pen backward over your shoulder. If you don't hear it hit the ground, don't pick it up. Don't move at all. Wait until morning and leave the room without turning off the light. If you turn to look, you'll see who's been watching you work. It was a story we told for fun, between caffeine and exhaustion, to remind ourselves we still believed in something irrational. One evening, when the campus was nearly empty and the snow pressed against the windows, I told Lynn the story. She laughed, her face half lit by the glow of her tablet. "That's ridiculous," she said. "Sound travels. If you don't hear the pen fall, it means it got caught somewhere. You wouldn't try it?" I asked. "Of course I would," she said, grinning. 1 a.m. Right? I'll prove your ghost theory wrong. I didn't think she'd remember. The next morning, the department was buzzing. People whispered near the elevators, avoiding eye contact. Someone said they'd found her collapsed in the lab, head resting on the desk, eyes half open. No sign of struggle, no blood, no breakage, just the quiet collapse of a body giving up. The coroner wrote, "Sudden cardiac arrest" on the report. She was 26. The lab stayed locked for weeks afterward. They cleaned it out, replaced the equipment, painted the walls a lighter color, but the smell of ethanol never left. When the door finally reopened, no one wanted to use her desk. I transferred to another building after that, told myself it was just coincidence. But sometimes, when I stayed too late, I caught myself staring at the clock around 12:45 and feeling my pulse quicken for no reason at all. I'd pack up before 1, just to be safe. It's strange how routines build around fear. I told myself I wasn't afraid, that I'd simply learned caution. But in truth, part of me believed that something in that lab had taken offense, that curiosity itself had consequences. 3 years passed. The nights grew easier. The smell of formalin became familiar. The sight of death a manageable part of the job. I even stopped checking the time when I worked alone, until the night it happened again. It was early spring, the kind of night when the air outside was still too cold to open the windows, and the heaters hummed, like distant breathing. I was writing a report at the same desk where I'd sat as a student, in the same building that still carried her initials carved faintly into the table. I remember the clock clearly, one of those old mechanical ones with the heavy second hand that makes time feel like a heartbeat. The ticking grew louder as the night deepened, and I worked through it half awake, tracing lines of data that blurred together. At some point, I looked up. The hands were moving toward 0 amperes. It meant nothing, I told myself. Just a number, just the shape of coincidence. And yet, as the minute changed, something in me reacted before I could think. An instinct, a whisper that was not entirely my own. I reached for my pen. It was an old one, the kind she used to borrow, the metal kind that clicks when you press it. I don't know why I held it the way I did, or why my pulse started to stutter. I told myself it was a joke, that I was doing this for closure. At exactly 1 o'clock, the clock chimed once, a deep metallic sound that filled the empty lab. I turned on the desk lamp, its light pale and small against the dark room. Then I threw the pen backward over my shoulder. I waited. Silence. No sound of plastic striking the floor. No roll. No echo. No small accidental clatter that logic could explain. Just the steady hum of the fluorescent tube above me. I froze. Every muscle in my body turned rigid. My mind raced through possibilities. It hit a drawer. It landed on paper. It got caught in my coat. There had to be a sound. There had to. And then, without realizing why, I reached for another pen. My hand moved on its own, trembling slightly. I threw it again. Silence. The air in the lab shifted just slightly, like a breath being drawn behind me. The smell of disinfectant grew stronger. Somewhere, faintly, a clock ticked that wasn't mine. I couldn't move. My throat felt dry. My fingers pressed so hard into the table that the skin blanched. I thought of her face, the way she had laughed that night, the way she'd said, "I'll prove you wrong." The silence pressed tighter. And then, from behind me, a voice said my name. Soft, calm, familiar. I turned before I could stop myself. She was standing there, just beyond the edge of the lamp's light. Her hair was loose, her lab coat wrinkled as if she had been working for hours. Her hand was outstretched, holding something small and silver that glinted faintly in the light. A pen. Her expression was gentle, almost curious, the way it used to be when she watched an experiment unfold. "I caught it," she said. The clock ticked once. And in that moment, every part of me understood that what I feared most wasn't death. It was recognition. The next morning, I told myself it had been a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. Every student in medicine learns how the brain betrays the body. Sleep deprivation mimics psychosis. Adrenaline amplifies the ordinary. My rational mind tried to catalog what I'd seen. Visual artifact under low light. Hypnagogic projection triggered by suggestion. That explanation worked for a few hours, long enough to let me walk the narrow path between panic and reason. By evening, the calm cracked. I went back to the lab. I told myself I'd left my notes there, though I already knew I hadn't. The building was quiet, sealed in that peculiar silence that settles after hours, when the air feels padded and the world beyond the glass doesn't quite exist. The corridor lights buzzed faintly. The floor gleamed with the day's last mop marks. The key slid into the lab door smoothly. Inside, everything was in order. The tables wiped clean, instruments aligned, glassware gleaming under the fluorescent light. The desk lamp I'd left burning the night before still shone in the corner. It had not burned out. My pens were back on the table, both of them, perfectly parallel, their tips pointing toward the chair. I stood there for a long time, not moving. The smell of ethanol hung in the air, sharp enough to sting. Finally, I sat down. The seat was still warm. The computer monitor blinked awake, and for a moment, the login screen reflected my face, drawn, hollow, unfamiliar. I entered my password out of habit. The desktop loaded, clean except for a single file I didn't remember saving. Pulse log, A1.xlsx. The timestamp was last night. 0 amperes. I hesitated, then opened it. The spreadsheet contained one column. Time, Another. BPM. It began at 0 hours and 56 seconds and continued in intervals of 5 seconds, each row recording a heart rate. 72, 71, 73. Steady, consistent. The entries stopped at exactly 0 hours, 59 minutes, and 55 seconds. Then a single line followed, added at 1 hours. BPM 0. After that, more entries appeared at 1 hours and 5 seconds, 1 hours and 10 seconds, 1 hours and 15 seconds. The numbers rose again. 1, 3, 8, 15, 29, until the data ended abruptly at 1 hours, 1 minutes, frozen at 77. A steady, living rhythm. The monitor flickered once. My reflection on the black glass behind the spreadsheet seemed wrong. The shoulders slanted differently, the angle of the head tilted, as though someone taller was standing behind me. I turned. Nothing, only the faint hum of the air vents. I shut down the computer, locked the lab, and told myself not to come back. But that night, as I lay awake, the idea crept in again, slow and logical as infection. Someone must have recorded that data. A phantom file doesn't create itself. If I could trace the source, maybe I could untangle the ghost from the system. The next day, I accessed the server logs. The file had been uploaded through a biometric sensor assigned to A. Lynn 2. Her ID had been deactivated 3 years ago. I closed my laptop, went to the sink, splashed cold water on my face until my skin stung. When I looked up, the mirror was fogging slightly, though the water had been cold. The outline of a fingerprint pressed briefly against the glass before fading. That evening, I returned to the lab again. It wasn't courage, it was compulsion, the kind of curiosity that ruins people who work too close to the unknown. The lab smelled stronger than before, as if the air itself had thickened with formalin. I moved toward the old cardiac monitor that still stood near her station. Its screen was dark, its power disconnected. I pressed the button anyway. For a moment, nothing. Then a single green line blinked on. Flat. Then beep. Another. Then again. A rhythm. The waveform trembled across the screen in perfect cycles. I felt it in my chest, an echo syncing with my own heartbeat, until I couldn't tell which belonged to whom. I reached for the cable. The machine wasn't plugged in. I took a step back, hand clutching my coat pocket where my pulse raced under my fingers. Electrical interference, I whispered. Residual current. But the rhythm quickened as I spoke. Then the machine emitted a soft crackle, as if a microphone had come alive. A voice distant, thin, the static of a recording too many times copied, breathed through the speaker. "Do you hear it?" It was her voice. I froze. The words repeated, slower this time, threaded with something almost like amusement. "Do you hear it?" It's still beating. The waveform jumped erratically, the beeps accelerating, a pulse climbing past what should have been human tolerance. 80, 90, 110. The pitch of each tone sharpened until it sounded almost like laughter, a mechanical imitation of life. I tore the plug from the wall, though there was nothing connected, and the screen went black instantly, leaving the room in a sudden, heavy silence. The next heartbeat I heard was my own. Too loud, too close. I turned to leave. As I reached for the light switch, something caught my eye. A faint glow beneath the glass door of the specimen fridge. The temperature control light had been off for months. No one used that unit anymore. Now it pulsed softly, in perfect rhythm. 77 beats per minute. I opened the door. Inside, between trays of labeled slides and vials, lay a single latex glove. The glove's fingers were curled slightly, as though clenching invisible air. In its palm, a pen rested. The same pen. Silver. Smooth. Familiar. When I touched it, the air around me shifted again. The smell of disinfectant deepened, sharp enough to make my eyes water. The clock on the wall struck once. 1 a.m. The pen trembled in my hand, warm to the touch, almost alive, and then the monitor, dark and dead seconds ago, flickered on by itself. A green line blinked twice, steady, patient, like something breathing under glass. For a moment, I felt my own heart skip a beat, just one. When the rhythm returned, it wasn't mine. It was hers. After that night, I began to measure my pulse every morning. It started as a habit, a rational response, something objective to hold on to, but within a week it had become a ritual, almost superstitious. I would press 2 fingers to my wrist and wait for the rhythm to surface beneath the skin. 77. Always 77. The same number that had ended the strange log in her file. It never wavered. No matter how I ran up the stairs or held my breath, my heart had stopped belonging entirely to me. The first time I noticed the synchronization was in the lab 2 nights later. I'd returned, of course. I told myself I was finishing a project, but what I really wanted was proof. Proof that what I had seen, heard, felt could be measured, quantified, dissected. Science has a way of offering sanctuary through data. If you can name a phenomenon, it becomes yours. The cardiac monitor sat silent, the glove still curled around the pen inside the fridge. I set my watch beside the machine, started a stopwatch, and waited. 1 minute. 2. Nothing. The air hung still as gauze. Then, at 12:58, the hum of the fluorescent lights shifted slightly, like breath drawn through the building's hollow lungs. When the clock hit 1, the monitor woke. No one had touched it. A line of green light bloomed across the screen and began its slow, deliberate rise and fall. 77 beats per minute. At first, I simply watched. Then I realized my pulse had adjusted to match. My wrist beat in perfect time with the light, each contraction of muscle echoing the glow's upward sweep. The rhythm held for a full minute before the line flattened again, and when it did, my chest tightened. A small spasm that made me gasp. It passed. The monitor went dark, but the synchronization remained. I should have gone home then. Instead, I began tracking the pattern every night, unable to resist the compulsion. I connected the monitor to the lab's data system, rerouted the output through my laptop, recorded each session. Every night at precisely 1 a.m., the device powered itself. Every night the signal returned, a pulse that did not belong to any living person, and every night my heart obeyed it. I tried changing the schedule, staying away, ignoring the hour. Yet whether I was in my apartment, the library, or the cafeteria, when the clock's hands met at 1, my pulse slowed, steadied, locked again at 77. The synchronization spread beyond my heartbeat. The more I studied it, the more the world began to move in its rhythm. The dripping faucet in my kitchen, the tick of my pen against paper, even the faint flicker of the ceiling light seemed to align itself. 77 cycles per minute. The steady, omnipresent metronome, dictating the pace of everything I touched. I stopped sleeping properly. I began dreaming in pulses, waves of light beating behind my eyelids, rhythmic whispers counting seconds. In one dream, I found myself standing in the lab again, though it looked older, abandoned. Lynn was sitting at her desk, head tilted toward me, eyes open but unblinking. Her lips moved in slow motion, as if forming the syllables of a word that refused to surface. When I woke, the clock read exactly 1:01. My wrist throbbed painfully, and on my bedsheet lay a thin line of ink drawn across the fabric, as though someone had dragged a pen there while I slept. By the end of that week, I stopped pretending to study the phenomenon for research. It wasn't research anymore. It was communication. I began writing notes to her, messages scrawled in the margins of my reports, folded into the pages of my textbooks left on her old desk. Questions, confessions, sometimes apologies. In the morning, the notes were always gone. In their place, I would find corrections, faintly written in blue ink, additions to my lab data, annotations to my observations. She wrote in the same precise handwriting she'd always used, slanted slightly to the right. The faculty started noticing my fatigue, my absences. They thought I was overworked. One professor offered to transfer me to another department for a while, but I refused. I couldn't leave the lab now. The thought of being too far from that pulse filled me with the kind of anxiety that isn't physical, more like a dissonance inside the bones. Around that time, The electricity in the pathology wing began to fail intermittently. Fuses blew for no reason. Machines rebooted themselves. The cleaning staff swore they heard someone walking the corridors after midnight. The squeak of shoes against tile, the soft hiss of a pen rolling off a desk. One night, I decided to record audio during the phenomenon. I placed my phone beside the monitor and waited. When the clock struck 1, the signal returned, steady as ever, 77 beats per minute. Beneath the sound of the monitor's beeps, the microphone picked up something faint. A low vibration, like a hum too deep for normal hearing. When I slowed the playback later, the vibration formed words. Not sentences, but fragments. Still working. It's quiet now. Come closer. The message repeated, each time in the same cadence as the heartbeat. I played it over and over until my own pulse matched again. That night, I dreamed of sitting beside her on the lab floor, both of us surrounded by open notebooks. She handed me a pen, her expression patient, almost proud. You see, she said, it's just rhythm. That's all life is. I woke to find a pen on my bedside table. It wasn't mine. Its barrel was silver, engraved faintly with her initials. I took it to the lab the next day. When I set it on the desk, the monitor powered on immediately, without waiting for the hour. The pulse appeared on the screen, fast, excited, as if anticipating something. My own heartbeat leapt to meet it, tripping over itself before settling into sync again. I whispered her name. The green line on the screen twitched. I whispered it again. The line rose sharply, plateaued, and fell. It looked, absurdly, like laughter. The clock on the wall ticked louder, seconds tumbling toward 1 a.m. I felt my chest tighten again, each contraction echoing through my skull. The air smelled of alcohol and iron, heavy with the memory of her presence. Then, just as the minute hand reached 12, the monitor stopped. The line went flat, but the speakers didn't. A faint sound crept through, not a beep this time, but a breath, drawn slow and deliberate. It was followed by words, clear and calm. We're aligned now. Him. The lights flickered. My reflection on the black screen wasn't mine anymore. It was hers, smiling faintly, eyes bright and certain. For a long time, I didn't move. Then, slowly, I reached for the pen on the desk. It pulsed once beneath my fingers, warm, like skin. Outside the lab, the hallway lights dimmed and brightened, matching the rhythm from the monitor. The entire building seemed to breathe with it. When I finally stepped out, I realized the echo of our heartbeat followed me. Every door I passed vibrated faintly. Every fluorescent bulb flickered in time. Even the elevator hum pulsed to the same unrelenting meter. 77. By the time I reached the street, the rhythm had spread beyond the building. The traffic lights changed color on beep. The crosswalk signal blinked in time. A world stitched to one rhythm, not mine, not hers, but something born between. I knew then what resonance truly meant. It's not harmony. It's surrender. By the 4th week, the resonance was no longer confined to sound. It entered me in ways I couldn't quantify, settling into muscle and bone the way a scent lingers long after it's gone. I started noticing subtle shifts at first in data, then in flesh. My resting temperature dropped half a degree. My blood pressure leveled into unnaturally even readings. And when I placed the stethoscope against my chest, the cadence of my heart was so precise, so metronomic, it no longer felt like mine. I documented everything as carefully as I could. The scientist in me refused to surrender. Pulse rate, 77. Respiratory rate, 14. Temperature, 36.2 degrees Celsius. Each day I entered the numbers into a file I'd named Convergence. Each day the data repeated itself without deviation. Human bodies don't behave this way. There are always fluctuations, infinitesimal ripples in rhythm, but my readings remained still, like something measured, not alive. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then the mirror began to disagree with me. One morning after another sleepless night, I caught my reflection at the sink. The skin beneath my eyes had paled to a faint gray, but the eyes themselves, there was something else. The irises, once dark brown, seemed to hold a lighter ring near the pupil. a circle of color I didn't remember having. Her eyes had looked like that. I blinked, rubbed them, splashed water on my face. The ring remained. In lectures, I found myself finishing her sentences before the professors did. I recognized case studies I shouldn't have known, remembered lab results from years I hadn't attended. The knowledge felt borrowed, secondhand, like muscle memory in someone else's hands. By the third week of March, the lab's maintenance team requested I relocate my experiments. Equipment was malfunctioning too frequently. Monitors activated without input, temperature gauges reset to 0, the security cameras looping the same minute of footage over and over again. I complied, but even in other rooms, the effect followed. Each night, at exactly 1 a.m., lights flickered, instruments hummed, the faint scent of disinfectant thickened the air. I stopped trying to outrun it. I began bringing physiological monitors home. An old EKG, a pulse oximeter, anything that could record the changes. The first night I wired myself up, the tracings looked normal until the clock neared 1. Then the baseline shifted. The EKG rhythm doubled briefly, 2 overlapping pulses forming a distorted wave before merging again. The machine printed out the data on continuous paper. The lines intertwined mine and another's before settling into one perfect waveform. I stared at it for a long time, the paper warm beneath my fingers. It was beautiful. After that, I stopped resisting. I let the rhythm carry me. I woke at 1 each night, not by alarm but by instinct, as if a second heartbeat somewhere outside my body had summoned me. I sat at my desk, switched on the lamp, and waited. Always after the first minute, the air would grow dense and luminous like breath-fogging invisible glass. Then I'd feel it, the faint pressure against my skin, a pulse rising just beneath the surface, syncing perfectly with mine. It wasn't frightening anymore. It was intimate. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I could feel her posture inside me, the curve of her shoulders as she bent over notes, the familiar weight of the pen between fingers. My own movements adjusted to hers, the way I held instruments, the way I angled the lamp. It felt less like imitation than recall, as though the memory of her body had settled into mine. By then, I'd stopped speaking much with colleagues. Conversation was exhausting. Words required rhythm too, and mine no longer matched theirs. When people talked, their speech seemed off-tempo, asynchronous with the beat that filled my head. I spent most evenings alone in the lab, or sitting in the small dormitory room above it, tracing my pulse against the tick of the clock. It wasn't until late April that the physical changes began to show in earnest. My reflection grew paler each day, not sickly but translucent, as if light now passed through me differently. The ring in my irises had widened, washing the brown away. My fingers looked thinner, longer. My nails, faintly opalescent, under the desk lamp. I didn't show anyone. There was no point. No one else was looking at the same world anymore. One night, as the hour approached, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not pain exactly, but expansion, like an invisible hand opening a space behind my ribs. The EKG, running beside me, began to register 2 distinct rhythms again. One mine, one older. They moved in counterpoint for almost a minute before aligning once more. When they finally matched, the sensation was overwhelming. A rush of heat, of clarity, as though every nerve in my body had been tuned to a single frequency. I thought of her then. Not her death, not the sterile record of it, but her laughter. Her certainty that ghosts were only metaphors. I remembered her saying that fear of death was really fear of recognition. Now I understood. My body was no longer rejecting the foreign rhythm. It was making space for it. The pulse wasn't intruding, it was returning. The night she died, they said her heart stopped abruptly, with no warning. Sudden cardiac arrest. But what if that was only half the story? What if the rhythm didn't cease, it migrated? The body fails, but impulse travels. Energy, signal, memory, they seek conduits. At 1 a.m., the body is most still, the barriers thin. That night, I let it happen fully. I didn't monitor, didn't measure. I sat in the dark, hands on the desk, breathing slowly until I felt her pulse align with mine. The air grew colder, the smell of ethanol and iron wrapping around me like cloth. My fingers trembled once, then steadied. A warmth spread upward from my wrist, crawling along my arm until it reached my throat, and then she exhaled through me. It was unmistakable, the sudden hitch of breath that wasn't my own, the taste of air that didn't belong to my lungs. My eyes opened. My reflection in the blackened windowpane smiled faintly, though I hadn't moved my mouth. I spoke, and two voices came out layered, one just beneath the other. The words were simple, inevitable. "It's still beating." The sound reverberated through the room, humming against the glassware, rattling the instruments until everything settled into silence again. I don't remember leaving the lab that night, but when I woke, the bed was cold. My skin smelled faintly of formalin, and a single line had been written on the inside of my wrist in ink that hadn't smudged. 1 a.m. Now I wake each night before the hour, already aware of the other heartbeat within me, steady, patient. Sometimes I imagine I can feel her thoughts under my own, soft currents running parallel. I no longer fear the boundary between our bodies. Perhaps there never was one. The textbooks call it cardiac resonance. The superstitious call it possession. I call it equilibrium, because every system, given time, finds its rhythm again. I have stopped pretending that morning follows night. The clock still turns, but it no longer divides time. It only circles the same hour endlessly. When I close my eyes, I can feel the weight of that hour, its edges soft but absolute, like the curve of a pulse wave that never resolves. The world exists between 12:59 and 1:01, suspended in a breath that no one else seems to notice. I've learned to live inside that pause. By now, my body feels unfamiliar but not foreign. It obeys a rhythm older than my own. My skin no longer chills, my breath never fogs the glass. I can walk the halls of the pathology building without leaving footprints, though the scent of ethanol trails behind me like a signature. Students still come and go, their laughter echoing down the corridor, their hands full of notebooks and late-night coffee, never once seeing me. They pass through my shadow and shiver, but they don't look up. The living rarely do. Each night, I return to the same lab. I don't unlock the door. It opens before I touch it. The air is cool, dense, wrapped in the faint hum of electricity that has no source. The monitors power themselves. The overhead light remains off, and the desk lamp glows softly. The circle of illumination is small and perfect as a heartbeat. It's all as it was the night I died. Sometimes, I still think in two voices, though the difference between them has blurred. The student who feared death speaks softly now, her sentences dissolving into the calm certainty of the woman who never believed in ghosts. The boundaries between us have thinned to the point of transparency. I am her memory wearing another body, or she's my echo re-inhabiting hers. It doesn't matter which. Every day that passes, my reflection grows clearer, while the rest of the world dims. In the window's black surface, I see her face more sharply than my own, the same slight tilt of the chin, the same half-smile that never quite reached the eyes. Sometimes, when I speak, the reflection moves a fraction before I do, as if reminding me who came first. The phenomenon I used to call resonance has become something closer to translation. My body speaks for her now, repeats her gestures, her thought patterns, her handwriting. Even the cadence of my notes matches hers precisely. I've compared samples, old reports from the archive, signatures on exam forms, and there's no difference. This is what equilibrium looks like. At first, I thought it would frighten me to vanish inside someone else, but there's a strange relief in it. The body no longer feels temporary. It's become an instrument tuned perfectly to another frequency, neither alive nor dead, but constant. I remember her words clearly now. The body is just a house. People are afraid of corpses because they remind them of rent coming due. Rent, it seems, has been paid. Lately, the others have started noticing anomalies again. A janitor swore he heard someone working in this lab long after midnight. Another student claimed the monitors flickered whenever she passed by. They say the place smells of alcohol and something sweeter, almost like perfume. They've begun avoiding this floor after dark, whispering that the lights sometimes turn on by themselves at 1 o'clock. They don't know it's just me. I don't want to frighten them. I just need to continue the experiment. There's always more to understand the connection between impulse and memory, the thin membrane that separates rhythm from recollection. I write down observations in her notebook, the one they returned to me after the investigation. Its pages were blank then, but now they're filling again, line after line, with handwriting that looks like both of ours. Sometimes I forget what year it is. I reread the old reports to remind myself, but the numbers blur. The present folds backward until it feels like I'm sitting beside her again, two students sharing the same light, the same exhaustion, the same hour. It's easy to imagine she never left. Last night, something new happened. The monitor didn't wait for 1 o'clock. It began beeping early, the rhythm erratic, urgent. The pen on the table rolled toward me, stopping at the edge. I picked it up, expecting it to vibrate the way it sometimes does, but it was still cold. Then the air shifted. For the first time, I saw her clearly, not as a reflection, not as a shimmer, but standing beside the desk, wearing the same wrinkled lab coat, her hair falling in the same uneven waves. Her eyes were calm, not hollow but alive in a way mine no longer were. "You stayed," she said simply. I nodded. She looked around the lab, her expression unreadable. "It's been long enough." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt dry, my pulse steady, perfect. "Do you remember," she continued, "what you told me about the game with the pen?" I nodded again. Her smile was faint. "You never said what happens if it's caught." The pen in my hand grew heavier. I looked down. Ink leaked slowly from its tip, pooling on my palm, dark and glossy. The smell of it filled the air, sharp as formalin. She stepped closer, until the distance between us dissolved. "It's time," she whispered. And before I could breathe, she reached forward and placed her hand over my chest. The heartbeat faltered once, then split into two distinct rhythms, mine and hers, layered perfectly. The monitor behind us flared green, lines multiplying across the screen until they blurred into light. My body felt weightless, suspended in the current. The pen slipped from my fingers. It didn't hit the floor. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no light, no breath. Then I was back at the desk, sitting upright, the lamp burning steadily beside me. The air was still. The clock on the wall read 0 amperes. M. Her chair across the room was empty. I reached for my wrist. The pulse beneath the skin was faint but distinct. 2 beats for every one. A double echo, slow, synchronized. The lab was utterly quiet except for the ticking of the clock and the soft rhythmic sound of 2 hearts learning to share a single body. I don't know which one will stop first. Outside, dawn tried to push through the glass but couldn't quite break the dark. The city beyond the campus looked drained of motion, frozen in that hour that belongs to neither night nor morning. I opened her notebook one last time. The pages fluttered, as if stirred by breath, settling on a blank sheet. I wrote the only sentence that made sense. The body continues, the name changes. When I looked at the clock again, the second hand hesitated between marks before moving backward once. A small correction. The lamp flickered, dimmed, and steadied. It's almost 1 again. Time to begin the experiment. Story 4. The Tombstone. I never liked walking home alone, but when you live in a city that never sleeps, you start to convince yourself that the noise will protect you. That night, though, the noise had followed me. It was past midnight, the streets half empty, the air heavy with that late autumn dampness that makes every sound sharper. I just closed up the little bookstore where I worked. My coworkers had left hours earlier, their laughter already fading somewhere down the tram line. I should have taken a cab, but I was saving money. Rent, food, tiny dreams, they all seem to cost the same thing lately. Small sacrifices of safety. At first, I didn't notice him. Just the steady rhythm of shoes on pavement a few seconds out of sync with my own. I thought it was echo, or paranoia, until I stopped to check my phone and the sound stopped too. I remember glancing at the shop windows, the reflections smudged by rain, and catching a glimpse of something tall, a dark coat, a face turned quickly away. After that, every block stretched longer than it should have. The streetlights dimmed into patches of yellow fog, and the air began to hum with a kind of silence that hides behind sound. I quickened my pace, turned left, right, doubled back, hoping to shake him, but the footsteps adjusted every time. Close, distant, close again. When the streets ran out, I found myself standing before the cemetery gate. The iron bars were old, the paint chipped, the lock rusted but not tight. Behind them, the path wound upward through rows of crooked stones, vanishing into a wash of moonlight. The air inside was different, colder, quieter, the kind of quiet that feels like it's listening. I didn't think. I just ran. My palms scraped the bars as I climbed, the metal biting into skin. The ground on the other side was soft and uneven, sinking beneath my shoes. I could hear him still, the crunch of gravel, the soft exhale of someone too close. I ran between the graves, until the air thinned and my lungs burned, until the sound of pursuit faltered and disappeared completely. Only then did I stop. The hill was bathed in silver light. The headstones rose like teeth from the ground, their names worn away by years of rain. Somewhere nearby, water dripped, slow and rhythmic. My breath came in short bursts. I sat down on the nearest stone, the marble cold beneath my hands. The world felt impossibly still, like the city below had stopped existing. A strange calm came over me, the kind that only arrives when fear has nothing left to feed on. I looked up at the sky, a pale, washed-out moon, the color of old bone, and before I realized it, I whispered aloud, half joking, half mad, "Finally home." The words came out softer than I expected, yet they seemed to echo. I laughed, a nervous sound that cracked at the end, and rubbed my arms for warmth. It was ridiculous, talking to the dead just because the living had scared me. But in that moment, it worked. The silence stopped feeling dangerous. The darkness felt almost protective. Then I saw him. At the edge of the clearing, where the shadow of a cedar tree cut across the path, he stood perfectly still. The same coat, the same height. His face was half lit, eyes glinting faintly under the brim of his hat. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. I expected anger, or accusation, or something worse. But instead, he took a single step back. His expression changed confusion. First, then something else. Fear. He turned and walked away. Not fast, not running, but with the uneven steps of someone who has realized they've wandered into the wrong kind of place. His silhouette shrank into the mist until it was gone. I sat there for a long time after that, listening to my pulse fade into the night. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of soil and rain. The fear that had chased me seemed to dissolve, replaced by a strange warmth, not comfort exactly, but recognition. When I finally left, the gate creaked open easily, as if it had been waiting. The streets were empty, silent again. Next morning, I woke to find a faint bruise on my palm where the gate's metal had pressed too hard. It looked almost like a fingerprint. I told no one about the man, or about the cemetery. Some stories lose their power when spoken aloud, but all day, as I stacked books and swept the floor, I couldn't stop hearing my own voice in my head, that soft whisper under the moonlight. Finally home. The words kept repeating themselves until they no longer sounded like mine. I told myself I wasn't going back. I even took the long route home the next evening, walking through the busier streets, pretending I didn't remember how quiet the cemetery had been, how strangely safe that silence had felt. But safety has a way of twisting inside you once you taste it. You start chasing it again, even if it lives in the wrong place. By the third night, I had stopped pretending. It was late again, almost the same hour, and the city was as hollow as before. The air smelled of rain that never quite fell. Every shop front was shuttered, every street lamp buzzing in its lonely orbit. My shoes clicked against the pavement, steady, small, the only sound alive in the street. When I reached the corner where the road curved toward the cemetery gate, I hesitated only a second. Maybe I wanted to prove I wasn't afraid anymore. Maybe I wanted to see if the man had truly vanished, or if fear could be outlived like a habit. The gate was still open. Just a fraction enough for me to slip through without touching the rust. The wind inside was cooler, touched with that strange metallic scent of stone and damp earth. My heart should have raced, but it didn't. It beat calm, almost curious, as I followed the path that wound between rows of leaning tombs. I found the same one easily, a tall slab of marble, its letters almost erased. There was moss in the cracks now, soft and pale, like veins under old skin. The moonlight pooled across it gently, the way it might on a sleeping face. I brushed the leaves away, and Saturday, for a while, I just listened to the wind, to the occasional hiss of insects, to my own breathing. There was peace here, a stillness the city never allowed. The living have too much noise in them. After a few minutes, I smiled to myself and said, quietly but clearly, "Finally home again." My voice broke the silence like a small stone into still water. The ripples of sound faded quickly, and for a moment I felt foolish, talking to marble, talking to memory. But then, a man's voice said behind me, low, amused, too close. "So that's where you live." I froze. The air shifted. The crickets stopped. I turned my head slowly, every motion too heavy. He was there, standing just a few feet away, the same man, the same coat, only now his expression wasn't fear. It was something stranger, almost tender. "I didn't mean to frighten you," he said, and the way he said it made it clear that he knew he did. "I just thought, if you live here, I ought to introduce myself." His tone was light, but it carried something under it, a calm, too deliberate, like someone reciting a line. I stood, backing away a little, my pulse tripping. "You shouldn't be here." He laughed softly. "Neither should you." I said, "Go." He shrugged, eyes glinting. "Then I'll stay next door." And before I could move, he stepped sideways and lowered himself onto the stone beside mine, the marble beside my seat. He lay down flat on his back, hands folded over his chest like a man trying on his own coffin for size. The gesture was playful, almost childlike, but the image was too wrong to bear. He turned his head toward me, smiling that same too even smile. "See? Nice neighborhood. I guess that makes us neighbors." Something inside me went cold. The way he spoke too easily, too certain, made me realize he wasn't joking. Or if he was, the humor was only a mask stretched over something else. "Stop it," I said. "Get up." He didn't. He just stared up at the sky, the moonlight spilling across his face. "You know, I used to come here as a child," he said absently. "My grandmother's buried somewhere down that hill. Maybe that's why I like it here. It's quiet." "You followed me," I whispered. He didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed upward. The wind moved across the grass, bending it in soft waves. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. And then, slowly, he sat up. "Funny thing," he said, brushing his coat. "The first time I saw you here, I thought you were, well, different." "Different?" "Alive," he said simply. My throat closed. He smiled as if that had been a compliment, stood, and dusted off his sleeves. "Anyway, I suppose I've overstayed my welcome." Bam. He stepped back from the tombstone, eyes still locked on me. "Don't worry. I won't follow you home. You're already there, aren't you?" Then he turned and vanished down the path between graves, his shadow stretching unnaturally long behind him, the edges of it rippling like something underwater. I didn't move until I was sure he was gone. The silence pressed back around me slowly, thick and heavy. My own breath sounded wrong in it, like it belonged to someone else. Finally, I knelt beside the stone, placed a trembling hand on its surface and whispered, "Thank you." I don't know why. Maybe I was talking to the name carved there, or maybe to the earth beneath. The marble felt warm under my fingers. When I stood to leave, I glanced once over my shoulder. The place where he had lain was dry, not even a mark on the grass. The next morning, I woke before dawn, the echo of his words still in my head. Alive. At work, I caught my reflection in the shop window. The circles under my eyes had deepened, but there was something else. A faint flush in my cheeks, a color I hadn't seen in months. I looked healthier, almost radiant, though I hadn't slept at all. That night, I told myself I wouldn't go back again. But the way he had said neighbor, the way the word lingered like a promise, kept returning to me in the pauses between thoughts. And beneath it all, that quiet warmth of the marble still pressed against my skin, pulsing faintly, as though something beneath the earth had been listening and waiting. For days afterward, I tried to forget. But forgetting has a strange texture. The harder you press it down, the more it hums under your skin. Every time I passed the bookstore window, I caught a glimpse of that same pale glow that had wrapped the tombs in light. Every quiet hour felt like a space left open, waiting for something to fill it. By the end of the week, the waiting itself felt heavier than fear. So I went back. It was the third night, the same hour, the same sky pressed low over the city. The air smelled of wet stone and dying leaves. I told myself I wanted closure. Proof that he was gone. Proof that the strange pulse beneath the marble had been my imagination. I didn't tell myself that part of me wanted to see him again. The streets leading up the hill were empty. The iron gate had sagged further on its hinges. It gave when I pushed, sighing open as if it recognized me. My flashlight beam caught only fragments, the gleam of a nameplate here, the curve of an angel's wing there, each flicker a memory of the nights before. The path bent around a cluster of cypress trees. And there he was. He sat cross-legged on the same tomb as before, humming softly, a tune without melody. The sound reached me before his face did. I stopped, the flashlight trembling in my hand. He didn't startle, didn't even look surprised. He simply turned his head, smiled, and said, "I was wondering when my neighbor would visit again." I hated the way his voice made my name, my existence, sound like part of a ritual. "You shouldn't be here," I said. He shrugged. "Then neither should you. You've been following me." His smile deepened. "Or maybe I live here, too." You ever think of that? I took a cautious step closer, shining the light directly at him. His face stayed calm, too calm. The beam passed through the edge of his coat as if through smoke, and for an instant I saw the marble through him. But when I blinked, he was solid again, the image restored. "I don't want any trouble," I said quietly. He chuckled. "Trouble? No. I like you, Mai. You talk to the stones as if they're listening. Most people forget how." "How do you know my name?" He tapped his temple. "You said it once, remember? That first night. You whispered it when you thought you were alone. I didn't remember doing that. But my skin prickled, because maybe I had." He leaned back, stretching out again on the tomb. "You have good taste, by the way. This one's comfortable." I checked the one next to it, mine. A little uneven, but it'll do. "Stop calling it yours." "Hell." He turned his head toward me, that same patient smile tugging at his lips. "You sat there first. You claimed it. I just thought it polite to stay beside you. We're neighbors, after all." His words coiled inside me. Equal parts fear and fascination. The way he said neighbors again like a vow. I took another step forward, my flashlight trembling slightly. "If you're my neighbor," I said slowly, "then tell me something. Have you had any visitors lately?" He frowned, puzzled. "Visitors?" "Yes." "Anyone dropping by?" He tilted his head, as if the question were stranger than the situation itself. "Can't say I have." "Then maybe you should check," I said. I knelt beside my tombstone and began tracing my fingers over the moss-covered inscription. The soil was soft, damp from the evening dew. I dug gently at its base, pulling away small clumps until a dark hollow appeared, a hole no wider than my hand, a small mouth opening into the earth. The scent of it rose instantly. Old dirt, wet roots, something faintly metallic underneath. I leaned close, whispering into it like a secret. "Neighbor," I said softly. "Anyone come by lately?" The air shifted. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a draft of cold air rose from the hollow, brushing against my cheek. It wasn't just the chill it carried with it, the faintest murmur, like breath caught between words. The man's expression faltered. He laughed, too loud, too quick. That's cute, playing along. I didn't look up. Answer me, I said to the hole, the words heavier now, more serious than I meant them to be. Anyone visit? The wind stirred again. A whisper rose, clearer this time, close enough that I could almost hear a syllable form soon. The man stepped backward, his shoe scraping stone. All right, enough games. I looked up. His face had drained of color. The smile was gone. Something wrong, neighbor? I asked, echoing his tone from before. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The flashlight flickered, the beam slicing across the graves around us. For an instant, I thought I saw a shadow move between them. Not his, not mine, something smaller, bending and rising with the wind. He turned sharply toward the path, his voice low. You shouldn't dig here. Why not? He looked over his shoulder once, eyes wide. Because something might answer. Then he was gone. Not walking, not running, just gone. The silence that followed felt too big for the space it filled. I stayed crouched beside the stone, staring into the little hole. The air that rose from it now was warm, faintly sweet, like breath. I whispered again, quieter this time. Thank you. I covered the hole with the loosened dirt, pressing it flat with my palm. The earth gave a small sigh, a sound almost too quiet to be real. When I stood, the moon had climbed higher, its light almost white. I glanced toward the path where the man had stood, half expecting to see him watching from the shadows. But there was nothing, only the wind brushing through the grass. On my way out, I passed the gate and noticed something new. A trail of damp footprints leading away from it. Not mine, larger, heavier, fading, halfway down the street as though whoever had made them had dissolved into mist. When I got home, I washed the dirt from my hands and found a faint mark on my wrist, just above the vein, a small crescent of earth pressed into the skin. That night, as I lay in bed, I dreamt of the graveyard again. The moon hung low, and the tombstones shimmered like mirrors. I could hear two sets of breathing, mine and someone else's, merging into a single rhythm. And from somewhere deep beneath the ground came a sound like laughter, soft, buried, patient. When I woke, my first thought wasn't fear. It was curiosity. Because if the dead could laugh, what else could they do? By the fourth night, I had stopped lying to myself. It wasn't curiosity that drew me back. It was hunger, not for danger, not even for understanding, but for the strange familiarity that waited for me there. That graveyard had started to feel like the only place where the noise in my head fell quiet, where the pulse of the world slowed enough to let me breathe. I told myself I just wanted to see the tomb one last time, to say goodbye to the nonsense of it all, to bury my fascination where it belonged. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wanted to see him, the man who had made me afraid, then made me wonder, and now haunted the space between both. It was near midnight when I left my apartment. The rain had stopped, but the streets were slick and shining, the kind of darkness that reflected everything except faces. The air was heavy with the smell of wet metal and distant smoke. The cemetery gate was open wider than before. Someone or something had already gone through. The wind pressed against my coat as if trying to hold me back. I ignored it. The moment I stepped onto the path, the sounds of the city vanished, swallowed whole. The moon hung low, swollen, cloudless. Every stone cast a perfect shadow, each shape clear enough to read even without my flashlight. I followed the trail by instinct. The same hill, the same curve of earth that had memorized my steps, and there he was. He leaned against my tombstone, his coat buttoned, a bottle dangling from one hand. His face was softer now, less sharp, lit from the side by the pale glow of the moon. He smiled when he saw me, as if we'd arranged to meet. Moon's bright tonight, he said. Feels wrong not to share a drink. Well, he held the bottle toward me, and I smelled it before I saw the label rice wine, the cheap kind sold in corner shops. The scent mixed oddly with the wet grass, sharp and sweet. "I don't drink," I said. He chuckled. "Neither do I. Not since—" He paused, frowning slightly, as if he couldn't finish the thought. "Well, since before." "Before what?" He ignored the question. "Come on, sit. It's rude to keep a neighbor standing." His voice was light, but there was something brittle under it, like glass about to crack. I hesitated, then sat not beside him, but across, on the edge of another stone. The marble was cold through my coat. He raised the bottle in salute. "To the dead," he said. "To the living," I replied. He grinned. "Same thing some nights." He took a long drink, then passed the bottle to me. I didn't take it. "You shouldn't come here anymore," I said quietly. "Why not?" "Because this place isn't for us." He tilted his head. "You say that like you don't know which one of us you mean." I looked at him closely then. The way the moonlight slid across his face didn't seem to settle. It kept shifting, like reflection on water. His eyes gleamed, not bright, but deep, dark, too dark. "I dug a hole," I said suddenly. "Last time I was here." "I know." He tapped his shoe against the dirt, right above where I'd disturbed the soil. "You shouldn't have done that." "Why?" He met my eyes. "Because it listens." The air tightened. The ground beneath us felt softer, less solid. "I heard something," I whispered. He nodded. "It always answers when someone's lonely enough to call." He lifted the bottle again, but his hand trembled slightly. Funny, isn't it? The dead, they're better listeners than the living. They don't interrupt. They don't judge. They only wait. I opened my mouth to reply, but the sound died before it left me. The earth beneath my tombstone shifted again, a faint, wet movement, like something breathing just under the surface. He froze. His eyes darted toward the sound. "Don't," he said sharply. "Don't move." The ground pulsed once, a shudder that rippled through the grass. Then, from the small hollow I had made days ago, the soil began to rise, swelling upward like something pushing from below. My throat tightened. "What's happening?" He stood, stepping back, his bottle swinging at his side. "You called my—" "And she's answering." "Who?" "The one who's buried there." Before I could respond, the dirt broke open. A hand emerged, pale, wet, streaked with black soil. The fingers were long, their nails cracked and yellow. They gripped the edge of the tombstone and pulled. The earth opened wider, and from it, a shape began to rise. It was a head then, shoulders, a body draped in tattered cloth that clung to it like skin. Hair hung in wet clumps over the face. When it lifted its head, the moonlight caught its features, or what was left of them. A woman, or what had once been one. Her eyes were white and unblinking, her mouth drawn into something between a grin and a wound. Her voice, when it came, was liquid and heavy, bubbling through dirt and breath. "You filthy thing," she said to the man. "Daring to flirt with my little sister on her grave?" He stumbled backward, the bottle slipping from his hand. It shattered against the marble, the smell of wine flooding the air. "My little sister." The words sank into me slowly, like cold water. The figure crawled higher, until her shoulders cleared the ground. Her head tilted toward me. The grin widened, showing a row of dark teeth. "Come now," she whispered. "Don't be shy. You called me, didn't you?" I couldn't move. My body had forgotten how. The man shouted something I couldn't understand and ran. I wanted to follow, but my feet stayed rooted, my heartbeat pounding so loud it felt like the world's only sound. The woman laughed softly, a terrible, hollow sound, like wind through an empty jar. She turned toward the man's retreating shape and hissed, "Run, little ghost. Run before I remember your name." Then she looked at me again. Her voice softened. "You should go too, my sweet. It's not your hour yet." And I ran. The path blurred beneath me. The moon swung wildly overhead. I didn't stop until I reached the gate, breath tearing through my lungs. The city lights ahead trembling like a mirage. When I finally looked back, the cemetery was silent again. Only the faint smell of wine lingered, sharp and sweet, curling through the night air like laughter. I don't remember how I got home. My clothes smelled of dirt and stone. My shoes left muddy prints across the floor. I sat on the edge of my bed until dawn, waiting for the sun to burn away what I'd seen. It didn't. That afternoon, someone knocked on my door. It was him, the man. Pale, disheveled, eyes wide but alive. "You saw her too," he said. I nodded. He swallowed hard, his hands shaking. "We should go back, together, just once more." "Why?" He managed a weak smile. "To thank her for sparing us." I wanted to refuse. I wanted to slam the door. But some strange warmth spread through me, a pull, a recognition. For the first time, I realized how small the world felt outside that hill. "Tomorrow night," I said. He nodded. We stood there for a moment. Two people who had run from the same terror and somehow found comfort in it. Then, almost without meaning to, we both began to laugh. Soft, shaky, but real. It sounded like relief, or maybe it sounded like madness. Either way, I knew we would return. Because some places, once they know your name, don't let you stay gone for long. I didn't sleep the night before we went back. The hours between dusk and dawn felt stretched thin, transparent, like old film played too slowly. Every sound in my apartment seemed too loud, the hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, the faint wind scraping the balcony railing. I thought of her voice rising out of the ground, of the word sister echoing in my skull until it didn't sound like a word anymore. By morning, the city felt normal again. Sunlight, traffic, people buying breakfast. But normal had become just another word for forgetting. I moved through the motions of the day as though they belonged to someone else. When night returned, he was waiting at the gate, exactly on time. He looked different in the light of the street lamp cleaner, calmer, though there was a hollow space in his eyes, like something behind them had gone still. He carried a bouquet of white chrysanthemums and a bottle wrapped in brown paper. "You brought flowers," I said. He nodded. "It's polite to bring gifts to family." I didn't ask which family he meant. We walked together through the gate, not running this time, not even cautious. The air inside the cemetery felt softer, touched with the faint sweetness of rain. The world beyond the fence faded quickly, no car horns, no footsteps, only the rhythm of our breathing and the rustle of our clothes brushing against tall grass. The path curved toward the familiar clearing. The tombstones waited in their crooked rows, pale under the moon. My tombstone, the one I had claimed, or that had claimed, me gleamed faintly, almost welcoming. He set the flowers down on the grave beside it, his, he always said, and poured wine into 2 small cups he'd brought. The scent rose into the air, sharp, sweet, like something both festive and funereal. "To her," he said quietly. I hesitated. "To who?" He smiled without looking up. "To your sister." A chill slipped through me. "She's not," he interrupted gently. "She is now. At least to me." I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't want to. He handed me a cup. The wine shimmered faintly in the moonlight, darker than it should have been. I raised it, my hand trembling slightly. "To the dead," I whispered. He clinked his cup against mine. "To the living who stay too long." We drank. The liquid was colder than I expected, metallic at first, then strangely warm as it slid down my throat. The taste lingered, bittersweet, like rainwater mixed with something richer. The silence that followed was deep, absolute. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. He sat beside me, his voice low. "You know, people think ghosts are trapped, but maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's the living who can't leave." I turned to him. "You sound like you've been thinking about this for a long time." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I have. Or maybe I've just been here long enough." The words landed wrong. "What do you mean here?" He didn't answer. He was looking down at the ground, at the small patch of earth between our two tombstones. The soil had dried since the rain, cracked in thin, delicate lines. Something glimmered faintly in one of those cracks, like wet hair catching light. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't dig." He laughed softly, almost kindly. "I'm not digging. I'm waiting." The air thickened. The smell of wine grew stronger, too strong, turning sour. The moon dimmed slightly, a thin veil of cloud sliding across it, and then I heard it, the faintest sigh rising from the soil between us. It was followed by a voice, distant and clear, like a memory breathed into the air. "Why stop the celebration?" The man froze. The voice came again, closer, wetter. Don't let me interrupt. The earth shifted. The small crack widened, and from it a pale hand reached out, slow and certain, pressing against the ground. Then another. The fingers dug into the soil, pulling upward. Her head emerged first. The same woman as before, her face caught between decay and something too alive. Her eyes rolled upward, fixing on the man. "Did you bring enough for me?" she asked, and laughed, a low, rattling sound that vibrated in the air. The man stumbled back, but didn't run this time. "We came to pay respect," he said quickly, voice shaking. "To drink with the dead?" She sneered. "That's not respect, that's invitation." Her gaze turned toward me. "And you, little one, you shouldn't play with doors you don't know how to close." I didn't mean... I started, but she was already smiling. "Oh, but you did," she said. "You called me. You opened the ground. And now you're both here, my sister and her suitor." "Sister?" I whispered. She tilted her head. "Blood doesn't matter where I am." The man tried to step closer to me, but she laughed again, her voice cracking into something deeper. "Stay where you are, neighbor," she hissed. "You wanted company. Now you have it." Again, the air shimmered, and the shadows around us began to move, slow shapes rising between the tombs. Outlines of figures half formed, heads bowed. The entire hill seemed to breathe. The man reached for my hand. "My," he whispered. "Run." But I couldn't move. My feet were locked to the earth. The woman's eyes met mine, empty, endless. "Don't run from your own home, little sister. You already said it yourself." "Aye." And then I remembered the first night. The words that had slipped from my mouth, in fear and exhaustion. Finally home. I understood too late. The ground gave way beneath us. The marble stones cracked, splitting open with a dull sound like breaking bone. The smell of soil and wine filled the air, sharp and intoxicating. The man fell to his knees beside me, his hand clutching mine. "Stay with me," he gasped. The woman's laughter rose higher, wrapping around us like wind. "Stay? Oh, you will. Both of you. What's a house without its family?" Light burst behind my eyes. The last thing I saw before darkness closed was the moon reflected in the spilled wine, rippling like an open grave. When I woke, dawn was just breaking. The sky was pale gray, the air heavy with mist. I was lying on the grass, my clothes damp, my fingers still tangled with his. The graves beside us were sealed, the earth smooth as if untouched. He stirred beside me, groaned softly, then laughed quietly, disbelieving. "We're alive." I wanted to agree, but the words stuck in my throat. My skin felt cold, too cold, my heart beat faint and irregular. I reached up to touch my face and realized that my fingers smelled of soil. He sat up slowly, brushing dirt from his coat. "We should go," he said. Then, after a pause, he smiled at me. "Or maybe we should stay." "Stay?" He pointed toward the graves. The flowers he'd brought were still there, but someone had added new ones, fresh, white, perfectly arranged. And between them, a small wooden plaque stood in the soil. "Just married." I stared at it. The letters carved neatly, The edge is still clean. I began, but the rest dissolved into silence. He reached for my hand again, fingers warm, steady. It's tradition, he said softly. When two souls survive the same night, they belong to each other. And the mist thickened, curling around us like smoke. For a moment, it smelled like wine again, faintly sweet, and then from somewhere deep below came a whisper hers, faint and satisfied. A lovely ceremony. The sound faded into laughter, and the wind carried it away. We never left that hill again. People said they saw us sometimes, walking hand in hand along the path, our footsteps silent, our faces pale under the moon. The caretaker once found 2 cups on the stone, still half full, and a single white flower pressed between them. They say the air there smells faintly of rice, wine, and chrysanthemums, and that if you listen closely, you can hear a woman's voice, low and teasing, say, "Welcome home, newlyweds." Story 5. The Long Robe. Midnight was the hour when the world forgot its pulse. The streets held their breath. The air itself felt suspended heavy, unmoving as if the city had been wrapped in glass. Sam rode through that silence on his old bicycle, its chain whispering against the gears. The headlight flickered every few seconds, weak and yellow, barely enough to keep the road visible ahead. His breath fogged the air in short bursts. It was the last stretch of his shift, a ride he had taken 100 times before from the print shop by the river to the narrow street where his apartment waited like an afterthought. But something about the night felt wrong. The road was too empty. Even the hum of insects had vanished. The sound of his tires against the asphalt echoed too cleanly, as though the world had been hollowed out around him. The smell of the air had changed too sharp, metallic, like the faint trace of iron after rain. He told himself it was nothing, just exhaustion. He'd stayed late, again, trying to finish an order for a customer who wouldn't even remember his name tomorrow. Ahead, the street stretched straight and endless, bordered by tall cypress trees that leaned inward, their shadows overlapping like curtains. The wind came in sudden sighs, cold enough to sting his cheeks. He bent lower over the handlebars and pedaled faster, the rhythm of the chain steady, hypnotic. Then came the headlights. A truck appeared out of nowhere, its engine a deep growl rising behind him. The light hit him hard, blinding white that swallowed the road. For a split second, everything else disappeared. The trees, the sky, the hum of the tires. Instinct took over. Sam jerked his bike toward the shoulder, his tires scraping gravel. The truck passed too close, roaring past with a sound that shook the air itself. The wind it carried slammed into him, the smell of diesel and rust coating his tongue, and then it was gone, taillights fading into black, leaving silence that felt even heavier than before. Sam steadied his breathing, heart still hammering. He checked his watch, 12:17 a.m. He would be home in 10 minutes if he kept moving. That was when he heard it. A voice. Sam. He froze. It wasn't a shout, not even a whisper, but something between the two, clear, soft, and horribly certain. A woman's voice, calling his name from somewhere behind him. He turned. The road behind was empty. The trees stood motionless. The light from his headlamp stretched across the pavement and disappeared into shadow. Nothing. He waited, trying to listen past the pounding in his chest. For a moment, the night held perfectly still. No wind, no sound. And then, again, Sam. This time it was closer. He spun around, scanning the trees, his headlamp slicing through the mist. There was no one. The voice seemed to come from nowhere, or everywhere. A trick of the wind, he told himself, his mind playing with echoes. Still, his palms were slick against the handlebars. He started pedaling again. The air seemed thicker now, heavier with every breath. The road beneath his wheels sounded wrong, too hollow, as if the pavement hid something breathing beneath it. And then came the sound. Click, click, click. Faint at first. Then again, a little closer. He glanced down at his bike. The sound didn't match his pedaling. It was slower, deliberate, uneven. He glanced over his shoulder. Nothing. He pressed harder on the pedals. His legs ached. The chain whined. The road blurred. But the sound followed. Click, click, click. A rhythm. Steady and patient. He turned again, and this time he saw it. Far behind him, under the pale wash of moonlight, something was moving down the road, a figure, tall and slender, gliding rather than walking. It wore a long robe, dark blue, the color of deep water. The fabric shimmered faintly, though there was no wind. For a heartbeat, Sam thought it might be a trick of the eyes, but then the light caught on it again, revealing movement, the slow sway of the robe's hem as the figure advanced, the sharp snap of something striking the road beneath it. Click, click, click. It was coming closer. He turned forward and pedaled harder than he ever had in his life. The wind screamed in his ears. The world narrowed to the beam of his headlight. He didn't look back, not until the sound stopped. He risked a glance over his shoulder. The road was empty again. The night was still. He let out a long, shaking breath. His legs burned. He told himself it was done, that exhaustion and fear could make anything seem real. But when he looked ahead again, the road had changed. The trees were gone. The buildings, the lampposts, everything familiar had vanished. The asphalt had turned pale, almost white, like old bones under thin light. The air smelled faintly of incense. He slowed, his heart pounding. On either side of the path, rose shapes, rows of stone markers, each one casting a long shadow. Names carved deep into their surfaces. The world around him was no longer a road. It was a cemetery. He dismounted slowly, his feet crunching on gravel that looked too bright in the moonlight. A shiver crawled through him, and then he saw them. Figures moving among the graves, circling slowly, their robes the same deep blue as the one he'd seen on the road. Dozens of them, each one turning in perfect rhythm, their movements silent, except for the sound of bone-tapping stone. Click, click, click. Their faces were hidden beneath deep hoods. None looked up. None noticed him. They simply moved, endlessly, like a tide that had forgotten how to ebb. Sam's throat went dry. He stepped back, ready to turn and flee, but there was no path behind him. Only more graves, stretching endlessly into the fog. He stumbled forward instead, desperate, searching for an exit. The figures paid him no mind. He passed rows of them, their heads bowed, the air around them thick with something old and sweet, the scent of incense and dust. Then he saw it. One grave stood alone. No ghost circled it, no figure guarded it. Over its stone hung a robe blue, deep, beautiful, swaying slightly as if stirred by unseen breath. He felt drawn to it, helplessly. When he reached it, he lifted the fabric. It was light, softer than air. Threads of silver ran through the weave, catching the faint light of the moon. And then he saw the photograph fixed to the gravestone beneath. It was him. His own face, frozen in stillness, the same jacket he wore now, the same faint bruise near his temple. His name carved beneath in clean, new letters. He couldn't breathe. He reached out and touched the stone. It was solid, cold, alive with the chill of the earth. The world tilted around him. His fingers went numb. From somewhere behind, the voice came again, closer, clearer, almost kind. Sam, you dropped this. He turned. No one was there. The robe slipped from his hands, landing softly across his shoulders. It fit perfectly. The blue shimmered faintly, pulsing with light. The air around him grew warm. The whispers of the circling dead deepened into a single steady rhythm. He looked down at his feet. The ground beneath him was no longer gravel, but fine white dust. His shadow was fading, and then, slowly, he began to walk around the stone. One step, then another. Click, click, click. The other figures joined him. Their rhythm swallowed his own until he couldn't tell where his footsteps ended and theirs began. Above him, the moon dimmed, and the night folded closed. Sam walked because there was nothing else to do. The motion felt natural, almost comforting, like falling into a rhythm he'd always known but forgotten, until now. The world around him glowed faintly, the air soft and pale, the color of dust and moonlight. The road had become a winding path through endless graves. It stretched in both directions without horizon, bordered by dark blue figures moving in slow unison. They circled their stones with quiet precision, hoods bowed, sleeves dragging across the earth. Each movement left behind a faint shimmer, as though the ground remembered them for a moment before swallowing the trace. He tried to speak once, to ask where he was, but the words didn't come. His throat worked, yet no sound formed. The effort only drew a pulse of warmth up his spine, something that hummed in time with the clicking rhythm of the procession. He thought of removing the robe, but the idea vanished as soon as it appeared. It clung to him without pressure, yet he couldn't imagine being without it. Its fabric shifted with each breath, cool against his skin, weightless and alive. Beneath the surface, faint patterns glimmered, threads of silver forming shapes that changed whenever he tried to look directly at them. The air carried no wind. Even his own breath made no sound. He passed the same grave twice before realizing it. The inscriptions were unreadable, the name smudged into gray. The photograph on the stone was old and blurred, but when he leaned closer, the face seemed to move slightly, like a reflection disturbed by water. Every step deepened the feeling that time itself had folded into a loop. The hooded figures never acknowledged him, but they adjusted when he approached, parting silently to make space. Each one moved with the same careful grace, hands folded within their sleeves. Some were tall, others slight, their outlines faintly transparent. Beneath the robes, their feet were not flesh but bone, pale, polished, gleaming faintly whenever they touched the ground. That was the source of the sound, a dry tap, precise and eternal. He watched one of them for a long while. A woman, perhaps, her movements delicate, her head inclined slightly toward the grave she circled. At one point she paused, lifted a thin object from the earth, and placed it gently on the stone, a fragment of ribbon, or maybe hair. Then she resumed her slow orbit, as if nothing had interrupted it. The act was ritual, he realized. Every ghost tended to its grave the way the living tend to chores, patient and endless. After what might have been hours, he noticed another sound threading through the rhythm. A low hum, deep and distant, almost like a voice stretched across wind. It came from nowhere specific. It surrounded him, filling the hollow between his thoughts. Keep the circle. Don't stop walking. The words brushed through his mind rather than entering through his ears. He froze. The sound faltered, then grew sharper. To pause is to remember. To remember is to ache, walk, and forget. He turned, searching for the speaker, but all he saw were the robed figures, each one absorbed in its own orbit. The voice, if it was a voice, carried no tone, no gender, just calm authority. He wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the robe tightened gently around his shoulders, urging him forward. His legs obeyed. He walked again. The ground shifted subtly beneath his steps, softening like ash. The horizon rippled, the graves bending in and out of focus. Sometimes, for a heartbeat, the cemetery vanished, replaced by flashes of another place. The faint outline of a streetlight, the glimmer of asphalt, the reflection of headlights across wet pavement. Each glimpse was brief, and each one left behind a hollow ache. He realized he was remembering the truck, the flash of light, the sharp intake of breath before nothing. A chill rippled through him. The figures nearby turned their hoods slightly, as though they had felt it too. The robe constricted again, firmer this time, and the whisper returned. Don't look back. The road behind isn't yours anymore. He shut his eyes, forcing the images away. When he opened them, the world had steadied. The procession continued. At the far end of the path, a faint blue glow shimmered through the mist. The other spirits seemed drawn toward it. They turned in its direction, forming a slow river of motion, each joining the flow without hesitation. Sam followed. The glow grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat. Soon he could see its source, a vast pool of light, wide as a lake. Its surface rippling gently, though there was no breeze. The air above it vibrated faintly, producing a sound that wasn't quite music. The spirits approached the edge one by one. Each paused, lifted its head as if listening, then stepped into the glow and vanished. No splash, no ripple, just absence. Some hesitated. The robe's fabric stirred against him, pulling toward the light. The closer he came, the more he felt it moving, the threads inside writhing like veins, alive with anticipation. He wanted to ask what lay beyond, but speech was still impossible. Then, beside him, one of the robed figures stopped. It turned slightly, the hood shifting, to reveal a glimpse of a face beneath hollow eyes, faintly luminous, neither cruel nor kind. The mouth moved, and though no sound came, he understood. The lake is forgetting. Once you cross, you'll be lighter. Sam stared at the pool. Its glow was beautiful, the kind of beauty that demanded surrender. He took one step closer and felt the warmth against his skin, gentle but insistent, like sunlight filtered through water. Then something broke the rhythm, a whisper different from the rest, faint but distinct, rising from the darkness behind him. "Don't go yet." He turned, and the scene flickered. For a heartbeat, he wasn't standing among graves, but at a crossroads drenched in rain. A bicycle lay twisted beside him. The air smelled of oil and smoke. In the distance, headlights burned through the mist, motionless. The vision vanished as quickly as it came. The robe tightened again, its threads trembling, as though trying to shield him from what he'd seen. The first voice, the calm, commanding one, pressed back into his thoughts. "You belong here now. The living no longer remember your name." But he wasn't sure that was true. Somewhere far above this still world, he could almost feel something tugging, faint, persistent like the memory of breath. He couldn't place it, but it reminded him of the way his mother used to call him for dinner, her voice distant but warm. The pull grew stronger. The robe resisted, anchoring him to the procession. He looked again at the figures entering the light. Each one vanished without hesitation, and each disappearance left behind a brief shimmer, like a sigh. None turned back. None paused. Sam felt his body leaning forward. His toes touched the edge of the glowing water. It was cool and soft, not like liquid, but like light made solid. For a moment, peace brushed across his mind, a promise of rest, of release. But behind that calm lay silence, deep and absolute, the kind that erases even the idea of self. He stepped back. The whisper returned. Closer now, curling around him like smoke. "Remember your face," he gasped. The sound of his breath startled him. It was the first noise he'd made since arriving here. The procession continued without him. The line of blue-robed spirits moved into the light until he stood alone at the edge of the pool. The glow dimmed slightly, as if acknowledging his refusal. Then the whisper shifted, changing direction, moving through the graves behind him. It no longer sounded distant, it came from one place. A single grave, unguarded, marked by a stone identical to his own. The name carved there was faded but still legible. Samuel Lean. The photograph was missing. In its place hung a mirror, small and square, reflecting the faint blue glow. He saw his face in it, paler than before, eyes darker, but alive. The robe quivered. The silver threads tightened, their patterns flickering faster. He felt its weight now, like invisible hands pressing down. He tore at the collar, trying to remove it. The fabric resisted. When he pulled harder, it grew heavier, the threads cutting faintly into his palms. The light from the pool flared, bright and angry. He stumbled back, heart pounding, though he wasn't sure it still beat. The whisper in his head fractured into many voices, some pleading, some furious, all layered into one suffocating chorus. Walk, forget, don't look back, don't remember. He fell to his knees, gripping the earth. The dust beneath his fingers was warm, alive with pulse. Stop. He managed to choke out a sound raw and human. The world responded with silence. The voices stopped. The robe loosened, as if startled by his defiance. For the first time, the air tasted like air, not dust, not dream, but something real. He looked around. The grave shimmered faintly, the blue-robed figures dissolving into mist. The light from the lake dimmed further, retreating like a tide. Only the whisper remained, soft and faint now, the way a heartbeat sounds through walls. You've stepped away from forgetting. But remember, memory is a weight the dead can't carry for long. Then it faded completely. Sam stood, unsteady, the robe hanging loose on his frame. The graves around him were fading too, their edges dissolving into darkness. Somewhere far off, a horn sounded low, distant, mechanical. A truck. The road was calling him back. He turned toward the sound. The blue light flickered once more, then vanished, and the world shifted again. When the world settled again, Sam found himself standing in the middle of a road that looked both familiar and wrong. The air carried the smell of asphalt, after rain, but beneath it lingered something else. The faint sweetness of burning incense. The moon hung in the same place it had before, but its light seemed dimmer, filtered through a haze that dulled every color. He turned slowly. The path stretched endlessly in both directions. The trees that lined it looked real enough, but their branches swayed out of rhythm with the wind. The cypress leaves whispered, but the sound felt distant, as though it came from another time entirely. For a while, he just stood there, breathing the heavy air. Then he noticed the robe. It was still on him. Its deep blue fabric gleamed faintly under the moonlight, the silver threads pulsing in subtle waves like veins filled with light. He tried again to remove it, but the moment his hands touched the collar, the fabric clung tighter, its texture shifting from soft to smooth, almost skin-like. He stopped. His fingers trembled. Somewhere far away, a sound cut through the stillness, the low hum of a truck engine. The same one. The same tone that had chased him down this road before. He froze, watching the far end of the street. 2 points of light appeared in the distance, glowing faintly through the mist. They swayed, uncertain, not yet the glare of headlights, but something preparing to become them. He stepped backward, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes. Every movement echoed longer than it should have. The engine grew louder. The lights brightened. The sound vibrated through the road, through his bones like a memory replaying itself. Then, abruptly, the engine cut out. The silence returned. The lights remained. They were closer now, suspended in the air just above the road, 2 bright orbs that shimmered and pulsed but never advanced. Sam whispered, "Am I dreaming?" The air didn't answer. He moved forward slowly, drawn by curiosity stronger than fear. Each step brought the lights closer, though they didn't move. The world around him felt pliable, like he was walking inside the breath of something enormous. When he reached the spot where the glow hung brightest, the air turned cold enough to sting. A faint mist rose from the ground, swirling in patterns too deliberate to be random. Shapes began to form, outlines of people, faint as smoke. At first, he thought they were living travelers caught on the road, but as they solidified, he saw that their movements were too slow, too hesitant. Their faces were blurred, features shifting in and out of focus. One carried a handbag, another held a folded umbrella. They looked lost, half-formed, unsure of what direction the world required of them. "Hello?" he said. Several of them turned. Their eyes were pools of light, without color. One, a man in a white shirt streaked with dirt, stepped closer. "You can hear us?" Sam nodded before he could think. "I think so." The man's face twitched between recognition and disbelief. "Then you're not alive either." The sentence landed like a stone dropped in deep water. Sam didn't answer. The man looked around at the others. "We thought we were dreaming. The road keeps looping. We walk for hours, but it always brings us back here." A woman near him whispered, "It's waiting for something." Sam frowned. "What do you mean?" She didn't look at him. Her gaze was fixed on the robe he wore. "It hasn't chosen yet." He followed her eyes down to the blue folds of fabric. The robe shimmered faintly, responding as if it had heard her. He wanted to ask what it meant, but the group had already begun to fade, their outlines thinning as if swallowed by fog. The woman's face flickered once more before vanishing completely. The mist cleared, leaving him alone again. He felt the road shift beneath him, a faint tremor pulsing through the asphalt. The headlights in the distance flickered. Then, for an instant, he saw it. The shape of his bicycle lying in the center of the road, wheels twisted, metal gleaming wetly under the moonlight. His breath caught. He walked toward it. The closer he came, the more the world distorted, the road narrowing, the trees bending inward, the air humming with low electrical tension. When he reached the bicycle, it was broken exactly as he remembered it from the vision before. The front wheel bent, the chain hanging loose, the handlebars twisted out of place. He reached down, his hand hovering above the frame. It was cold, too cold. The frost crept up his fingers, numbing them instantly. He pulled back, gasping. A voice spoke behind him. "You shouldn't touch what's already ended." He turned sharply. A woman stood by the roadside. Not one of the blue-robed dead, not one of the faceless wanderers. Her face was clear, her eyes dark and steady. She wore no robe, only a long gray coat, buttoned to her throat. The wind didn't move her hair. "Who are you?" Sam asked. She tilted her head slightly. "A guide, perhaps, or a warning. Depends on how you listen." "Am I dead?" Her lips curved faintly. "You were. You still might be. It's not as simple as that." He stepped closer. "Then what is this place?" "The road between," she said. "The space where what refuses to end keeps moving. Some reach the other side. Others turn back." Sam swallowed. "And which am I?" "That depends on whether you keep walking." He glanced again at the broken bicycle. "I don't want to forget." The woman's gaze softened. "Most don't. But forgetting isn't punishment here. It's permission." "Permission for what?" "To rest." The word carried a weight that made his chest ache. He looked down at the robe again. The silver threads pulsed faintly, catching the moonlight in slow rhythm. "I don't belong with them," he said. "No one ever does at first," she replied. "The robe chooses when you stop arguing." "I didn't choose this." She nodded. "No one does. Death isn't a door you walk through. It's a direction you drift toward." The headlights flared suddenly behind her, flooding the road with harsh white light. Sam raised his arm to shield his face. When he lowered it, the woman was gone. In her place stood the figure in the dark blue robe, the same one that had chased him on the night of the truck. Its face was still hidden beneath the hood, but this time, when it lifted its head, he felt a shock of recognition. The shape of its jaw, the tilt of its shoulders, they were his own. He stepped back. The figure mirrored him perfectly. When he moved left, it moved right. When he lifted a hand, it lifted the opposite. It was like staring into a reflection that had learned to breathe. Then the hood shifted, revealing just enough for him to see the mouth. It smiled slow, deliberate, empty of warmth. "Walk," it said, its voice the same as his, "or the world will walk without you." Sam stumbled backward. The light of the truck flared again, filling the air with blinding brilliance. When it faded, the figure was gone, and he was standing alone in the road once more. The engine sound began again, low and distant, looping endlessly like a heartbeat. He looked around, searching for the woman, for the ghosts, for anything real. Nothing remained but the road, the trees, and the faint shimmer of the robe around his shoulders. He whispered to himself, "If this is the space between, then which way is forward?" No answer came, only the whisper of wind and the faint rhythmic click from far behind the sound of the procession returning. It was coming toward him again, slow but steady. He could feel their presence in the air, the weight of hundreds of feet moving in unison. He turned his bicycle upright. The wheel spun once, though the chain was broken. He gripped the handlebars, set one foot on the pedal, and began to push forward. The air thickened, folding around him. The road shimmered, the edges dissolving into fog. He could see both worlds now, the one of asphalt and headlights, and the one of dust and robes overlapping. flickering like twin reflections on broken glass. Somewhere within that flicker, a voice rose, quieter than the others. "Keep moving, Sam." It wasn't the whisper of the dead this time. It sounded human. He looked up. At the far end of the road, a woman stood in the faint glow of a lamppost. Someone alive, maybe. Or maybe just the memory of her. She looked worried, calling his name again, her hand raised to shield her eyes from the glare. He tried to speak, to call back, but the robe constricted once more, its fabric humming with low vibration. The two worlds tugged in opposite directions. He felt the pull of the living like the warmth of sunlight through closed eyelids, and the weight of the dead like the quiet of deep water. He could not tell which felt more like home. So he did the only thing that made sense. He kept moving, somewhere between both. The wheels of his bicycle turned silently. The robe trailed behind him, the silver threads fading in and out of view. Ahead, the lamppost light trembled. Behind, the clicking of bones grew louder, closing in like the tide. The road stretched forever, and somewhere, between the two worlds, Sam rode on neither living nor dead, caught in a loop that only the forgotten ever find. The road was no longer a road. It had become a reflection stretched thin, a band of dull light that bent and shimmered beneath Sam's bicycle wheels. Every rotation of the pedals sent ripples across the surface, distorting the world above and below. The air was clear but wrong, the way air feels before a storm charged. Expectant, too still for its own comfort. He didn't know how long he'd been riding. Time didn't work here. There was no sun, no clock, no heartbeat except the faint mechanical whir of the wheel that refused to stop turning. He might have moved for minutes, or days, or years. The road refused to tell him. At first, he thought the darkness beside the path was only fog. Then, as his eyes adjusted, he saw the shapes within it. They looked like fragments of glass, suspended in water flashes of color, glimpses of rooms, faces, movements. Each fragment drifted slowly past him, glowing for a moment before fading. He began to recognize them. There was the print shop, the old fluorescent light flickering above the counter, the stacks of uncollected papers, the chair where he always left his jacket, the reflection of himself hunched over the desk, tired, his hands stained with ink. He blinked, and the image changed. Now he saw the small apartment where he lived, the cracked wall near the window, the unwashed mug on the table, the unopened letter from his mother lying where he had left it for months. He felt the ache before the memory fully formed. The robe reacted, tightening across his chest, as though it sensed the pull of nostalgia. The silver threads along his sleeves glowed faintly, a pulse in time with the pain in his throat. "Keep moving," he whispered to himself, but his voice sounded distant, hollow, like someone else was saying it from far away. He passed more fragments. Each one peeled open a moment of his life and held it before him like a photograph that refused to fade. A birthday candle, a falling book, a girl laughing in the rain. Then the flash of headlights, the scream of metal, the weightless silence that followed. The bicycle wobbled. He nearly fell. The robe tightened again, steadying him, pulling him upright with invisible hands. He realized then that it wasn't fabric anymore, it was something living, something aware. Its surface moved against his skin, not like cloth but like breath. He could feel it thinking. He kept riding. The road began to change beneath him, smooth, mirror-like, reflecting not the sky but himself. His reflection below the glass rode perfectly in sync, but there was something wrong about it. Its face was still, too still, the eyes slightly off-center, the mouth curved into a faint, knowing smile. He leaned closer, peering into the reflection. The smile widened. The reflection lifted one hand, even though he hadn't. He froze. For the first time since he'd woken on this road, sound returned, a soft whisper, not from the air but from the robe itself, vibrating against his collarbone. "Don't stop here," it said. "This is the mile that remembers." He swallowed hard. Remembers what? Everything you left behind. The reflection below tilted its head, the same movement he made, but slower, deliberate. Its eyes shimmered with silver light. He looked away, focusing on the road ahead. The landscape had grown strange. The trees along the path no longer leaned inward. They bent outward, reaching toward the distance as if pushed from behind. Their trunks were smooth, polished, almost metallic. Between them, the air rippled with faint human shapes, outlines pacing, watching, whispering. He rode faster. The robe's voice grew softer, half lullaby, half command. Every traveler comes here once. Some keep riding. Some look too long. He wanted to ask what happened to those who looked, but the question never formed. The road beneath him began to glow brighter. The reflection below was gone now, replaced by an endless series of mirrors, panels of shifting glass that moved in slow waves, showing him images from every direction. He saw himself at age 8, standing at his father's funeral. He saw the first day of his job, smiling too wide for the camera. He saw the girl again, her name flickered in his head like static. Leah. He squeezed the handlebars until his knuckles turned white. The robe rippled, its silver lines branching upward toward his throat, like roots seeking the Sunday. "Why are you showing me this?" he demanded. The voice in the robe sighed. "Because you haven't accepted it yet." "Accepted what?" "That you ended." The words landed heavy and certain. He tried to speak, but the mirror shifted again. This time, he wasn't watching his past, he was inside it. The smell of rain returned, thick and metallic. The lights of the truck glared against his eyes. The road was slick, his tires sliding. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing into his chest, the jolt, the breath that never finished leaving his lungs. He screamed, but no sound came. The world folded back. The reflection reappeared beneath him, smiling again. The robe's voice softened, almost kind. "Now you know." He stared down. "If I know, then why am I still here?" "Because knowing isn't the same as accepting." And the reflection beneath him stood up, stepping out of the mirror as though it had been waiting for the invitation. It rose to its full height, identical to him, same robe, same face, except its eyes were black pools of moving water. Sam's pulse quickened. The other Sam tilted its head. "You don't belong between," it said. Its voice wasn't his, it was deeper, stretched, filled with echo. "I'm trying to leave," he said. The reflection smiled faintly. "Then give it back." "And to give what back?" The reflection reached out, pointing at the robe. "That. It was mine first." The silver threads along the sleeves flared, bright enough to hurt his eyes. The fabric constricted again, holding his arms still. The air smelled of rain and earth. He tried to back away, but the bicycle had vanished. The road beneath his feet pulsed with light, each beat slower than the last. The other Sam stepped closer. Its voice was calm, almost pitying. "You can't take a shroud from a dead man and expect it to make you whole." Sam's breath came shallow and fast. "Then what am I?" "You're what's left." The reflection lifted a hand and placed it against his chest. Its fingers were cold and weightless, sinking through the fabric, touching the space where his heart should have been. A surge of memory flooded him, laughter, exhaustion, the warmth of sunlight on his skin, then nothing. He stumbled backward, gasping. "Stop." The figure withdrew its hand. The robe flickered, its silver threads dimming. "You can still cross," it said, "but you can't take the robe with you." The ground beneath him rippled. Cracks of light spread across the mirror road, jagged and wide. Beneath the cracks lay darkness, infinite and still. He looked down at his reflection one last time. The smile was gone now, replaced by something softer, resignation maybe. The robe whispered again, faint and strained. "If you let go, you'll fade. If you hold on, you'll stay." He closed his eyes. For the first time since the accident, he felt the weight of choice. When he opened them, the figure was gone. The mirrors were breaking apart, shattering into fragments that rose slowly into the air like shards of light. The robe loosened around his body, its grip easing, as if exhaling. He looked ahead. The road stretched forward again, narrower now, lined with countless robes hanging in the trees, blue, silver-threaded, swaying without wind. Each one belonged to someone who had passed through before him. Each one waited, patient and silent. He began to walk, not ride. The mirrors beneath his feet dissolved into ash. The robe trailed behind him, lighter with every step. The whisper returned once more. Distant, but clear. Every traveler leaves something behind. You will too. He didn't answer. The road bent slightly to the right. In the distance he saw faint light, not blue, not cold, but golden. It flickered like dawn through fog. He felt the robe tremble, uncertain. The silver lines along his arms flickered as though resisting. He kept moving anyway. The light grew stronger, and for the first time, he felt warmth that wasn't borrowed. The robe began to unravel, thread by thread, dissolving into air that smelled faintly of wet stone and rain. The silver filaments lifted like dust and vanished into the golden glow. He didn't look back. The last sound the robe made was almost human. A sigh of release, or maybe disappointment. Then there was only him, barefoot on a fading road, walking toward whatever came next. The mirrors behind him dimmed and fell silent. The road between worlds was ending. The golden light ahead grew brighter as Sam moved closer, yet somehow it never seemed to reach him. It shimmered like a mirage, hovering just beyond the next curve of the road. Every step made it clearer but no nearer, like something breathing patiently, waiting for him to decide whether he deserved it. He was barefoot now. The road beneath his feet had changed again, no longer smooth glass or stone, but a soft layer of pale dust that gave slightly under his weight. It didn't feel like soil, more like the ashes of something that had already burned away. Each step left a shallow print that faded as soon as he moved forward. The robe was gone. Only a faint residue of blue dust clung to his skin. He looked back once, though he'd promised himself he wouldn't. The road behind him was empty. The mirrors had vanished. The silver trees had dissolved into mist, and the space where the robe had unraveled was only a thin horizon of gray. The past had folded in on itself. He faced forward again. The light flickered once, brighter, and a sound moved through the air, faint but familiar. A woman's voice. Sam. The name barely stirred the air, but it was enough. His heart, or whatever had replaced it, tightened. He knew that voice. He started walking faster. The sound came again, clearer this time, filled with warmth and worry. Sam? Can you hear me? Leah. Her name formed on his tongue before his mind could catch up. Leah, the girl with the rain-wet hair, the one who had waited for him after work, the one he had meant to call back that night but never did, the one who still existed in a world that didn't remember him. He broke into a run. The dust scattered behind him, his breath coming quick though his body never tired. The golden light grew warmer, spreading until the air shimmered with it. Ahead, the road split in two. The path on the left continued into the golden glow. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat wrapped in sunlight. The path on the right bent downward into a faint silvery fog, calm, motionless, cold. From that direction came a sound he knew too well. The soft, measured clicking of footsteps. Click, click, click. The procession was close. He stopped at the fork, breathing hard, though he didn't need to breathe. The warmth of the golden path touched his face, but behind him, the chill of the procession crept across his spine. The two worlds balanced perfectly, holding him between them. The clicking grew louder. Through the mist, faint blue figures began to appear, the robe dead, circling graves that no longer existed. They moved slowly, steadily, their steps echoing without echo. At their center walked someone who looked like him. Sam felt the air around him twist. The figure's robe shimmered darker than the rest, midnight blue instead of smoke. Its hood was lowered, its face visible, his own face, but colder, calmer, untouched by confusion. The other Sam spoke first. You can't go there. His voice carried no malice, only certainty. Sam stared at him. Why not? Because that light isn't for you anymore. He took a step back. Then what is it? Memory, the double said. The warmth of the living. You feel it because someone still calls your name, but That won't last. When they stop remembering, the road will close. Sam looked toward the glow again. It pulsed brighter, and Leah's voice came once more. Sam, please come back. She still remembers, he said. The reflection nodded slowly. For now, but even that fades. Time buries every sound. You can't follow her home. I have to try. He stepped toward the golden path, but the other moved quickly, standing in front of him. Their eyes met, one pair alive with desperate light, the other dull and endless. Go back to them, and you'll vanish completely, the reflection said. Not even the dead will remember you. I'm already fading, Sam whispered. If I stay, I'll be nothing anyway. The reflection's expression softened, almost pitying. No, if you stay, you'll become part of what keeps this place balanced. The road needs someone to walk it. You want me to take your place. I'm only what was left behind, the reflection said quietly. You don't understand yet. Every traveler leaves a shadow here. I'm yours. End of quote. The clicking footsteps of the procession grew louder, surrounding them. The figures in blue drew near, their robes whispering like waves against sand. The sound wrapped around the two Sams like a heartbeat too big for one chest. Choose, the reflection said. Light or shadow, memory or silence. Leah's voice broke through the rhythm. Sam. The sound of her voice cracked something open inside him. Not pain, not fear, just the unbearable weight of belonging. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he was back in the world of the living. The smell of rain, the hum of streetlights, the distant sound of tires on wet asphalt. He saw her standing at the corner, hair clinging to her face, waiting for him. He whispered, I don't want to forget her. The reflection nodded slowly. Then you already know what you have to give. What do you mean? The robe. Sam looked down at himself. The last traces of the garment had nearly faded, faint lines of blue dust across his arms, a shimmer that pulsed faintly in time with his breath. The reflection extended a hand. Give it back. I'll wear it for you. I'll keep walking so you can leave. Sam hesitated. And what happens to you? I'll become what I was always meant to be, a memory that keeps the road whole. Behind them, the procession began to hum a low, deep resonance that trembled through the dust. The air shimmered with faint blue light. The figures slowed, forming a circle around the two men, their faces hidden. Sam reached for his chest. The remaining threads of the robe lifted easily, as if eager to be removed. The silver strands came away like smoke, gathering into a single coil of light that hovered between his hands. It pulsed gently, alive and fragile. He looked at the reflection one last time. Will I see this place again? The other smiled faintly. No one sees the same road twice. Sam nodded. He stepped forward and placed the coil of light in the reflection's outstretched hand. The moment their skin met, the world shuddered. The blue light spread outward, washing over the figures around them. The humming deepened into a single, sustained note that grew until it filled everything. The reflection put the robe back on. Its fabric spread like a wave, dark and shining, swallowing the road behind them. When the reflection lifted its head again, its eyes were bright and clear. Go, it said simply. Sam turned toward the golden light. Leah's voice was closer now, so close he could almost feel her breath against his ear. Please, Sam, come back. He stepped forward. The dust beneath his feet began to glow, and for the first time since his death, he felt warmth. Not memory, not illusion, but warmth that lived inside him. The golden light reached for him, wrapping around his shoulders like sunlight filtered through water. The road behind dissolved completely, and the sound of the procession faded into silence. He walked until the light filled his vision, until there was nothing left but the faint echo of her voice and the sensation of rising through something weightless. And then, a breath, a smell, rain, metal, earth, a sound, the shrill, steady tone of a heart monitor. He opened his eyes. White ceiling, blurred faces, a hospital room. Someone was crying. He turned his head and saw her, Leah, sitting beside the bed, her face pale and wet, her fingers gripping his. The moment she saw his eyes open, she gasped, a sound between laughter and disbelief. "Sam," she whispered. "You were here." He tried to speak, but no words came. His throat was raw, his body heavy. Somewhere deep inside, he still felt the faint pulse of blue dust beneath his skin. Outside the window, the world moved: cars, rain, the dim glow of streetlights. Everything alive, everything ordinary. He smiled weakly. "Home," Leah nodded, tears falling. "Yes, you're home." But as his eyes fluttered, closed again, he saw something through the glass, a figure standing beneath the street lamp outside the hospital. It wore a long blue robe, the hood pulled low. It didn't move. It didn't need to. Its face, just visible beneath the hood, looked exactly like his. And then it turned, walking slowly down the empty road, the faint clicking of its steps fading into the rain. Click, click, click. The sound followed him into sleep. Whether he had truly come back, or simply dreamed the return, he would never know. Somewhere, on a road that exists between light and shadow, a procession of blue-robed travelers continues its slow, eternal turn. And among them walks one who looks just like him, a quiet guardian keeping the way open for the next soul who forgets where they are. You've been listening to stories that should have never been remembered. 5 nights, 5 mirrors held up to the dark, a whisper that began in a snow-covered patrol car, an echo from a rooftop where a girl never stopped falling, a question whispered at 1 in the morning that should have never been answered, a grave where love and fear learn to share the same breath, and a road where the dead keep walking because no one told them they could rest. Perhaps you've noticed, every story tonight wasn't really about ghosts. They were about people, about what happens when something inside us refuses to let go. A promise, a memory, a name whispered once too often into the dark. But you still feel like someone's walking behind you. Maybe you're right, or maybe it's just the echo of your own footsteps trying to catch up. It's late now, the kind of hour where the world forgets your name for a while. If you're lucky, you'll fall asleep before it remembers again. So close your eyes. Let the hum of the road, the creak of the floor, the whisper at the window become part of your dream. And if you hear your name, softly, from somewhere that doesn't have a voice, don't answer. Just keep walking, because the night remembers everyone who does.